year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Tuesday, the 16th of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Gareth Southgate sensationally quits. After 8 years as England manager, 2 Euros finals, the now former manager bowed out, telling fans their support has meant the world to me. I'm an England fan and always will be. Thank you, England, for everything.
And it's a resignation bonanza today. Vaughan Gething also quits as Welsh First Minister. Just 4 months into the job. We'll have all the latest reaction for you.
Elsewhere, a bandaged Donald Trump defiantly took to the stage last night and announced his vice-presidential pick, Senator J.D. Vance, who claimed Britain will be an Islamist country under the Labour government. Well, as the Republicans confirm their presidential ticket, we'll ask how will this affect the UK?
Well, it is a bit of a resignation bonanza. Anything could happen in this time slot, really. So we've got the resignation of Gareth Southgate. Some people are cheering, some people are sad. There'll be some disagreement over his legacy, I'm sure. And then Vaughan Gething up in Wales. What does this mean for Keir Starmer? Of course, Keir Starmer once said that the Welsh Government was a blueprint for what Labour could do in Westminster as government.
It does look like there's been a bit of a chaotic tenure across the United Kingdom, whether it was the short tenure of Liz Truss and then the booting out of Rishi Sunak. We've also seen up in Scotland absolute chaos within the Scottish Nationalist Party, and now in Wales too, a First Minister who lasted just over 100 days. I think in Westminster terms we call that 2 Liz Trusses.
118.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not a lot, is it? Not something to write home about. I mean, I guess you can be proud that you were First Minister. I think he wrote that in his resignation letter. But yes, very much pushed out of the job. We'll bring you all reaction analysis. Let us know what you think. What does this say about devolution? gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. But it's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. The top story at 12 o'clock is, of course, that the Prince of Wales has now said that Gareth Southgate is an all-round class act after the England manager announced in the last hour or so he is resigning after more than 100 games and almost 8 years in charge. In a statement, he wrote, "As a proud Englishman, it has been the honour of his life to play for the nation and to manage the England squad." And that announcement comes just days after the team lost the Euros final to Spain. FA Chief Executive Mark Bullingham has praised Southgate for transforming the men's side and delivering unforgettable memories. It's hoped his successor, they say, will be confirmed as soon as possible. And in some other breaking news this lunchtime, in Wales, First Minister Vaughan Gething has announced he is standing down after 4 members of his cabinet quit their post this morning. He's said to be discussing a timetable for his departure, but claims any suggestions of wrongdoing are politically motivated. It comes after he lost a confidence vote in the Welsh Parliament last month, following a row about a donation to his leadership campaign. A major assessment of the UK's future military needs has begun to deal with what the Prime Minister's calling a more dangerous and volatile world. Sir Keir Starmer's promising to bolster what he's described as Britain's hollowed-out armed forces, but won't say when spending on troops or equipment will increase to 2.5% of GDP, as promised in Labour's manifesto. It comes as the new Defence Review Chief, Lord Robertson, is warning of a deadly quartet, telling The Telegraph that China, Iran, Russia and North Korea remain a threat to the West. While Shadow Veterans Minister Andrew Bowie's accused Labour of leaving the armed forces in the lurch.
It's really important that the money gets to where it's needed, and that's what we would have done had we been re-elected. To say when economic conditions allow, I mean, that's giving us there's no end point to that statement. That could be 10, 15, 20 years. And the armed forces need certainty. The military needs to know whether or not they're going to get the money that they need to spend on the equipment and the personnel that they require to keep this country and our allies safe moving forward in what's a very tumultuous, increasingly dangerous world.
Tributes are being paid today to Jay Slater following yesterday's discovery of a body in Tenerife. Lucy Law was one of the last people to hear from the teenager and says she is lost for words. She was on holiday with the 19-year-old when he disappeared now 4 weeks ago, and in a post on social media, she's described him as one of a kind. Matt Smith, a vicar in Jay's hometown in Lancashire, had this message for the family.
Our message would be that the community have always been here for you and supporting you and praying for you, and that's been very evident in the response that they've had. For this family, we're standing beside you as much as you need us to be. We're here for you.
Donald Trump has appeared in public for the first time since the assassination attempt on him in Pennsylvania at the weekend. The former US president was applauded for several minutes at the Republicans' National Convention in Wisconsin.
We are grateful for you to be our nominee for the 47th President of the United States of America.
Wearing a bandage over his right ear where he was shot, Trump waved and raised a fist to supporters at the event, and he also announced his running mate for the election. J.D. Vance, the man who once called him an idiot and compared Trump to Hitler, will become vice president if he re-enters the White House after the vote in November. Meanwhile, his rival Joe Biden has admitted it was a mistake to tell supporters that it was time to put Trump in the bullseye. He was speaking to Lester Holt on NBC News.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that wouldn't accept the outcome of this election automatically.
Here, a youth offenders institution in West London has been labelled the most violent prison in England. A report by the prison's watchdog found there were 6 times more incidents at Feltham A than some of the most dangerous jails in the country. The unit, which detains 15 to 18-year-olds, has been suffering from rising self-harm and very high levels of violence. The use of force has also risen there by 68%, and disorders have tripled since the last inspection. And finally, the new Labour government says its doors are open to areas of the UK which want to take on more powers from Westminster. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's so-called devolution revolution is promising to transfer more powers out of Whitehall than ever before. She's written to council leaders, urging them to partner with the government. And the Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, says the move will benefit the country.
We know that putting those powers in the hands of local leaders is a really important way of driving that economic growth. And if we can get economic growth up across the country, which is one of our central missions as a government, that's the way to make people better off.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Another update for you at 12:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past midday. And my goodness me, 2 large resignations within the last few minutes. Gareth Southgate resigning as England manager and Vaughan Gething resigning as First Minister of Wales.
Yes, we're going to be covering both, of course, with analysis, reaction and everything that comes in these next 3 hours. But which one do you care about most? Vaughan Gething, he's been in trouble for a little while now. There was that vote of no confidence against him in Wales. Keir Starmer went over to Wales and supported him, didn't he, during the election campaign and everything else. And then this, 4 ministers resigning in quick succession, and then he has resigned. So there you go. It's been dramatic over in Wales. But Southgate, Gareth Southgate, hero or zero?
Yes, he's been, of course, England manager for 8 years, took England to 2 Euros finals, got so close to those trophies, but once again, so far. So let's start with Gareth Southgate, who has quit as England manager following that defeat in the Euro 2024 final on Sunday.
Yes, his resignation comes after 8 years in charge of the Three Lions, which saw England reach 2 consecutive Euros finals.
Well, let's find out some more from our sports broadcaster, Aidan McGee, because, Aidan, I don't think a lot of people saw this coming quite so soon.
No, probably not quite so soon, but there was a degree of inevitability about it, Tom. I mean, I think if it didn't happen today, you're just delaying the inevitable. There were clear signs during the tournament and certainly after the game on Sunday against Spain that he'd had enough, he was ready to walk away. There were signs as long ago as 2 years ago when England played Hungary at Molineux. They lost 4-0 and the boos rained down from the crowd that day, and that really, I don't know, you can just tell the body language. I've been around the game a long time. You can just tell sometimes when someone's turning up. He's had a magnificent run. 8 years matches the length of tenure that Bob Robson served. Nobody's served longer since then. And I think, Tom, that he will be remembered as somebody who brought a great deal of dignity, class and integrity to the role. I think he'll be remembered as somebody who brought the team together. He established pathways from various stages of the underage groups of England's side, within the FA, the infrastructure that he helped set up himself. He was, of course, an ex-England under-21 manager. And you've got to say somebody who, on the pitch, on the face of it, achieved very well, but who ultimately could not quite get this team of established international players, world-class players, over the line.
I mean, it's one of those jobs where everyone and their dog has an opinion. What happens next, though? What happens with this transfer of power? Do people apply like any job, or is it more of an appointment?
Yeah, it's more of an appointment. I mean, I think there will be a process where people can apply. You have to have that kind of option open in case you get an application from left field which looks better than you may have thought previously. There are options out there. If we're prepared to expand our net overseas to a foreign coach, then there are much wider options. The issue here is that it depends how much the FA want to pay out. Gareth Southgate's salary of £5 million a year does sound like a lot, in football terms, in Premier League elite level, it's not that high. It wouldn't even put him in the top 6 or 7 in the Premier League. Pep Guardiola, for example, earns £20 million a year plus £5 million in bonuses.
Wow.
Jurgen Klopp was on £15 million. He's somebody, a name has been mentioned because he's out of work now. And England don't have a meaningful fixture really until next March, which means that it might serve Jurgen Klopp's desire to have something of a rest. However, do we want a German in charge? Some people would have a bit of a problem with that. Mauricio Pochettino, the Argentinian, is a problem. He's just, is an option, but he's just left Chelsea. Now, apparently, this is what I've been hearing. Pochettino, the prospect of Pochettino taking the England job is actually more of a problem in Argentina than it would be over here. So there's that bridge to cross as well. There are a couple of British options or English options who I don't think would necessarily tick the box. Graham Potter is very much FA. When I say that, that's crucial here because somebody has to lead the organisation. As I said to you before on your programme, if you look on the FA website, they've got 32 different blue chip sponsors. They all want their pound of flesh. It's important to look the part. It's important to say the right things. As the arbiters of the British game or the English game, it's absolutely crucial for an England manager to do that, and that would put the FA off some of the candidates I would suggest have been listed this morning.
Now, Aidan, I've got to say we're going to be speaking to Sam Allardyce, the former England manager, in around 20 minutes' time to get his view on questions like these. But what would you say is the legacy of Gareth Southgate? Is he someone who has been a disappointing manager, or is he someone who has set England up for what could be, finally, a trophy win in 4 years' time?
No, I don't think we're far off, Tom. I really don't. But that is more down to the players than what Gareth Southgate did. If you say there are probably 7 or 8 different tenets of what makes the ideal England manager, and we haven't had an ideal England manager for many decades now, I would say Southgate probably ticks about 7 of those. He got the unity right. He got the promotion of players right. His substitutions during the tournament were pretty good. He's developed a team that has got a bit of resilience about it. Don't forget, they were behind in all 4 knockout matches, and it was only the Spain game in the final that they didn't prevail. But ultimately, tactically, he was found wanting on a few occasions, namely the Euro 2020 final, which was played in 2021, 3 years ago against Italy. He didn't make the right substitutions in the final. They scored a goal early, and he sat back against a less than, well, certainly not one of the stellar Italian sides that we've seen over the last few generations, and end up losing that on penalties. Penalties is a good point. He seems to have banished the penalties hoodoo for England, at least to a large extent. And so, listen, I think that when the period of time has settled and we look back with a degree more objectivity, there's lots of emotion flying around there, but with more objectivity and a little bit of time to look back on his reign, I think we'll be looking back on a very good England manager who just was that much short of doing what was really required.
I don't know about you, but I think it would be nice to have an Englishman manage the England team going forward, or is that a bit Little Englander of me?
I think no, it's not. I mean, you know, we've been down that road before, Emily. I mean, Sven-Göran Eriksson was a very good England manager, but again, somebody couldn't quite cross the line. Fabio Capello, look, he was great in qualifying. His win percentage was fantastic, but ultimately in the final in 2010, in the finals of the World Cup in 2010, they were absolutely abject. And then he resigned before taking the team into Euro 2012, I should say. So, having said that, we shouldn't be harmed. We shouldn't be turned away from an overseas option just because it didn't work in the past. Because right now, Emily, if I'm looking at the top 7 or 8 candidates who've been linked with the England job, the best ones by far are from overseas. And crucially, unlike the previous options, all of them have worked in the Premier League up to now, the ones that I've seen mentioned, whereas Sven-Göran Eriksson had no link with the English game, and neither did Fabio Capello. That will be crucial in this instance as we choose our next successor.
Well, it's a huge choice and no doubt a hugely competitive field for the job. But for now, Aidan McGee, thank you so much for bringing us the very latest on that enormous breaking story.
So Southgate a bit underpaid with only £5 million a year.
Only £5 million.
Only £5 million. Got him on the cheap.
Absolutely. No, very, very cheap. Goodness me. Well, the news does not stop on this programme. Some more breaking news within the last few minutes. Of course, Welsh First Minister Vaughan Gething has resigned.
Yes, and he says he'll now start the process for discussing a timetable for the election of his successor. Right, so this could be a bit of a long process. Let's see. Let's find out more from GBNews political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, this has all been very quick and quite dramatic.
Yes, good afternoon, Tom and Emily. Well, it has. And it hasn't, because in a way, to be honest, this has been a very long time coming. I mean, Vaughan Gething, it's not even 4 months since he became Welsh First Minister. It was back in March he made history, the first black leader of any country in Europe. But I was at the Welsh Senedd covering it then, and subsequently when he lost a vote of no confidence. And there has been real problems from the very, very beginning. Now, it's all come to a head this morning when 4 ministers resigned. And of course, as Boris Johnson once said, when the herd moves, it moves. It did look this morning like basically it was all beginning to fall apart. But this has been building, because he sacked a minister a few weeks ago, alleging that she'd leaked messages. She denied that. There was great unhappiness. He'd lost a vote of no confidence a few weeks ago when 2 of his own Labour MSs were unable to make the votes because they were sick. They were also very unhappy with him, it's worth saying. And before then, even when he became Welsh First Minister, it was dogged with controversy. He very narrowly beat his rival, Jeremy Miles. The majority of members of the Senedd wanted Jeremy Miles to get the job, but Vaughan Gething had a lot of backing from the unions. But when he came in, there was unhappiness not just as you would expect within the opposition parties, but within Welsh Labour itself, because of the central issue of this £200,000 donation, which he had accepted for his campaign from a company led by a man that had been twice convicted of environmental dumping offences. There was also allegations of a conflict of interest, because that firm had received a loan from the Welsh government. So it was all very murky from the very beginning. Now, Vaughan Gething has put out a statement, no word of apology. He still insists that he says that the allegations of wrongdoing against him are pernicious, politically motivated and patently untrue. He still says he hasn't done anything wrong, but it's clear that his position has become completely untenable today.
Catherine Forster, thank you very much for that overview. What a sensational day for resignations across the board.
Politics, football, a big day all round.
Well, let's discuss this further now with Nation Cymru editor Martin Shipton, because, Martin, you have been following this story since the very beginning. You broke the story of this donation scandal. Just tell us how you did that.
Well, that's right. I mean, it was actually back in February, at a time when the Welsh Labour leadership election was underway, and I got tipped off that there had been this huge donation from a man called David Neal, who, as your political correspondent was saying, had received 2 convictions and, in fact, 2 suspended prison sentences for quite serious pollution offences, where toxic waste had been dumped in a protected area, actually, not very far from Cardiff. And a lot of people were very, very concerned about the size of the donation, but also particularly of its provenance. And as you have also alluded to, there were concerns relating to conflict of interest. This man who had provided the money was also making application for a big solar plant. He was also in trouble in West Wales, where a landfill site that he owned was causing enormous problems to local residents. And there was really, quite a concerted campaign against Mr. Gething, which began then, and a lot of people were extremely dissatisfied, not just opposition members, but also there was a great degree of uneasiness about what he was doing from Labour members as well. And then another matter came to light, which was, again, a leak to nation.cymru, for which I work, which was that at the height of the COVID crisis, he had written a message to fellow ministers in which he said that he was deleting messages which were government messages because he was frightened that they would be disclosed under the Freedom of Information Act. So there's been a hell of a lot going on, and this hasn't gone away. And for months and months and months, there has been a succession of stories, new revelations, and he's been under enormous pressure. He hasn't wanted to go, but he's finally had to go because 4 ministers got to the point where they asked him to go yesterday, he refused, and then they resigned, and then he's been forced out.
Yes, and Sir Keir Starmer, he stood by Vaughan Gething very recently, in fact, and he once said that the Welsh Government could provide a blueprint for what Labour can do in power down in Westminster too. Was all of that a mistake?
I think it was. I think that the UK Labour Party has backed Vaughan Gething for too long. Clearly, the general election intervened, and I think that had the general election not been called, he would probably have gone by now. But, of course, it made it difficult because the Labour Party didn't want him to have to go while the election campaign was on because they didn't want any distractions, and therefore they let him carry on. But that inevitably meant that Keir Starmer, when he visited Wales, would be asked whether he had confidence in Vaughan Gething, and he couldn't say no, so he had to say yes. So I'm sure it's been a bit of a dilemma for him, but the difficulty is that they have sought to portray themselves as a political party which is going to turn over a new leaf for Britain and get away from the sleaze which they would argue the Conservatives were mired in. But having backed somebody like Vaughan Gething has rather tainted that image, I think, and they'll be wanting now to move on pretty quickly and forget about Vaughan Gething, I suspect.
Goodness me. Well, Martin, your journalism here has been absolutely extraordinary. Thank you so much for talking us through this story from Wales today. Associate Editor of Nation.Cymru, Martin Shipton. Thanks for your time.
Yes, it'll be very interesting to see if Sir Keir Starmer has something to say on this. I'm sure he'll be asked about it and whether he regrets some of those previous comments he made, or at least standing by him for so long. But we're going to have more reaction to those 2 huge stories, including, of course, the former England manager Sam Allardyce. Get his opinion on Gareth Southgate's resignation. Don't go anywhere.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we've got a story and a half to tell you and bring you now. Our very own GB News political correspondent, who we love very much, Catherine Foster, joins us in the studio, and she's smiling, but she wasn't smiling for the past few days.
2 of her sons, Matthew and Andrew, were reported missing in Bali.
I got a text from a friend saying, can you give us a call, a bit worried about them. Then spoke to a girl they'd befriended who was in Sweden, but they'd met on their travels. And she told me that they'd gone up the mountain. By the time I found out, they'd been missing for 30 hours. They'd gone up the mountain on the Tuesday night, British time. This was the Thursday morning, without a guide. And they'd told her it was really hard. And she told them to turn back, but they hadn't. And they'd sent screenshots from this app with this trail that they were following on the app, screenshots of the app in case there was a problem, and a Snapchat of a Matthew avatar at the top. And she said, I know they made it to the top because I could see that his phone had nearly died. But the trail had actually closed many years ago. So the app, we will need to make sure that that gets taken off the app. But, you know, technology saved them in the end because it was the screenshots and it was the messages that they'd sent, but they should never have been without a guide.
But what were you doing during those 30 hours that Mum couldn't, when the phone died and Mum couldn't get in touch? Where were you? What were you up to?
Well, we were trying to figure out the best course of action, because it started to pour with rain. The amount of rain created a river, like a stream.
Yeah.
We were like, let's follow the stream downhill, and then the sun set, and we just had to sleep in the bushes in the jungle.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 27 minutes past midday. Now, the mother of missing teen Jay Slater is reportedly devastated after remains were found near his last known location yesterday.
Yes, after a month-long search in Tenerife, Spanish authorities found these human remains alongside his possessions and clothing.
Well, we can cross now to our reporter Sophie Reaper, who is at his hometown of Oswald Twizzle, where West End Church is offering support to the local community.
Well, good afternoon to you both. The mood here in Jay Slater's hometown of Oswald Twizzle today is a sombre one following that news yesterday that human remains had been found close to his last known location. Now, this evening, there'll be a service held here at the West End Methodist Church as members of the community come together as a sign of strength and support in what the church are describing as a devastating time. Now, this news, of course, will have come as a huge blow to Jay's loved ones, many of whom are still out in Tenerife, in particular his mother, who's been out there now for over 4 weeks searching for her lost son. Now, of course, we are still waiting on the formal identification of those human remains, but we know that they were located in the Mascar village, close to where Jay, his phone last pinged his location, and that the remains were also found alongside Jay's clothing and his possessions. So an incredibly upsetting time, and I think that's a sentiment that will be shared here at the West End Methodist Church this evening. Earlier on, we spoke to the Reverend here to find out how important that sense of community is at times like this.
Our message would be that the community have always been here for you and supporting you and praying for you, and that's been very evident in the response that they've had. For this family, we're standing beside you as much as you need us to be. We're here for you.
An incredibly upsetting time, and I think that support is something that a lot of members of the community here in Oswald Twizzle will perhaps be relying on. I know that for Jay's family this will be an incredibly difficult time as they wait for that confirmation that the remains found in Tenerife yesterday are in fact those of the 19-year-old who's been missing since the 17th of June.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sophie, for bringing us that update from Jay Slater's hometown. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, it's worth noting as well that the search and rescue teams are still searching that area in case they find anything else, presumably evidence or anything that may help them find out exactly what's happened here. But yes, the search continues, but devastating news for the family, of course.
Absolutely, and indeed we are expecting the results of this of the forensics in terms of absolutely determining. Of course, throughout the day yesterday, the Spanish local authorities were saying that all indications are that the remains that were found are of Jay Slater, but that cannot be 100% confirmed, of course, until those forensics, until that investigation is concluded.
Yes, and the search continues in that thick undergrowth around that area close to the village of Mascar in Tenerife. So we'll bring you any updates when we get them. But that was Sophie Reaper, our reporter there in Jay Slater's hometown, where they'll, of course, be reflecting on what's happened. But up next, we're going to be speaking to Sam Allardyce, the former England football manager, because Gareth Southgate, has stepped down as England manager today. That's after your headlines with Sam.
Up next, Sam Allardyce. First, the headlines with Sam Francis. It's just after 12:30, and the top story, well, the Prince of Wales has described Gareth Southgate, who's resigned as England manager, as an all-round class act. After almost 8 years in charge, Southgate says, as a proud Englishman, it's been the honour of his life to play for the nation and to manage the squad. The announcement comes just days after the team lost the Euro final to Spain. The FA Chief Executive Mark Bullingham has praised Southgate for transforming the men's side and delivering unforgettable memories. It's hoped, they say, that his successor will be confirmed as soon as possible. Opposition leaders have been calling for his resignation after he lost a confidence vote in the Welsh Parliament last month. That's Vaughan Gething, of course. He's now said to be discussing a timetable for his departure. But he's claiming that suggestions of any wrongdoing during his time as First Minister of Wales are politically motivated. One of the last people to hear from British teenager Jay Slater says she's lost for words following yesterday's discovery of a body in Tenerife. Lucy Law was on holiday with the 19-year-old when he disappeared 4 weeks ago and spoke to him when he was lost. In a post today on social media, she's described Jay as one of a kind. And a major assessment of the UK's future military needs has begun today to deal with what the Prime Minister's calling a more dangerous and volatile world. Sir Keir Starmer's promising to bolster what he's described as Britain's hollowed-out armed forces, but he won't say when spending on troops or equipment will increase to 2.5% of GDP. It comes as the new Defence Review Chief, Lord Robertson, is warning of a deadly quartet, telling The Telegraph that China, Iran, Russia and North Korea remain a threat to the West. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Your next update at 1 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Heavy showers will affect northeastern areas through today. There is a rain warning in force, but from the west it will turn much drier through today, and that leads us into a brief hot spell across the southeast to end the week. That's as a ridge of high pressure builds in from the west through the day. Low pressure still affecting eastern areas. That's where we've got the rain warning in force for northeastern areas of England and parts of eastern Scotland as well. We could see some very heavy showers here, but the bulk of the rain and cloud will push away to the North Sea, and behind it will turn much drier and brighter across western areas. Temperatures climbing towards the high teens, low 20s across some southern areas. So a bit of a warmer day once the sun does come out this afternoon. And that higher pressure is going to continue to dominate as we head into Tuesday evening. So that means it will be a fairly fine end to the day across western areas of Scotland. We've still got this warning across eastern areas, though, so do watch out for those heavy showers. There could be some surface water and localised flooding. Northern Ireland seeing a fairly bright end to the day, still a risk of the odd shower here and there. Also across parts of central areas of England and into the southeast, but across the west, a bright end to the day. And clear skies will become more widespread through this evening, so it's going to be a much clearer and drier night tonight once the last of the rain clears off to the east. So that does mean with clearer skies, it will be a fresher night. Last night was quite a mild night, particularly compared to recently. Tonight, temperatures will dip down a little lower in rural areas, but I think for many towns and cities will be in the lower teens. So not too bad at all. And with the July sunshine coming up nice and early, it will be a bright start to the day on Wednesday. And Wednesday's looking like a pretty fine day across much of the UK. There'll be a bit more cloud developing into the afternoon. A risk of the odd shower here and there, but most of us are going to stay dry with some warm sunshine, particularly compared to recently. Highs of 24, possibly 25 degrees across the south and into the high teens elsewhere.
The latest GB News travel.
Northbound on the M6, there's a lane closure to emergency resurfacing repairs from Carlisle south at 42 through to 43 for Carlisle. Traffic is coping well. In North Yorkshire and Scarborough, Ramshill Road, the A165 remains closed in both directions whilst the police deal with an incident from the A64 for Westborough through to Belmont Road. Very slow as a result. In Kent, coastbound on the M20, speed restrictions continue to Operation Brook. There's a cones area from 8 for Leeds Castle to 9 for Ashford, expect delays. London seeing a lane closure in Golders Green on the North Circular eastbound on the A406 to a broken down bus just before Henley's Corner. And Holloway and Parkhurst Road, the A503, are having reports traffic lights aren't working, so do approach with care. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 36 minutes past 12. Now, experts are warning that Britain may have to rely on immigration for the rest of the century due to declining birth rates.
Well, it comes as the difference between births and deaths in England and Wales has fallen to its lowest level for 45 years.
But migration has still driven the population to grow by 610,000 in 1 year, the highest for at least 75.
Goodness me. So is Britain reliant now on immigration? Well, Emeritus Professor of Demography at the University of Oxford, David Coleman, joins us now. Because, David, these are two very stark trends. The number of births in Britain collapsing, the number of migrants soaring.
Yes. It's really quite extraordinary and rather dismal. The birth rate is certainly low and lowest on record, and we mustn't get too upset about that because birth rates do go up as well as down. If you look into the past, as recently as 14 years ago, the birth rate was equivalent to almost 2 children per woman. Now it's down to 1.5. Before then, it had gone down to 1.6 in the year 2000. It does go up and down, and the way we measure it is one which tends to emphasise instability.
But David, sorry to interrupt, but all of those numbers you mentioned are below replacement. We need to be at 2.1 per woman in order to have a population that is replacing itself.
Well, we almost had 2.1 when it was at 1.9, but nonetheless, I don't think you need to have replacement level fertility. You don't need to maintain the population as long as the population isn't falling fast and aging isn't being too quick. We get rather obsessed with replacement migration, or rather with replacement levels of fertility. What matters is that changes are slow and modest. At the moment, they are not slow and they are not modest, as you pointed out, both in migration and in birth rate terms. But the time is not to panic, and there are good reasons why the birth rate should be so low at the moment. The dismal the economy, the terrible cost of childcare, the shortage of housing, the expense of housing, both renting and ownership. These are all rational reasons why birth rate should be low, and some of these are at least susceptible of being improved by government action on childcare and on housing as well. Other things may be more serious. If there is, some people suggest, a tendency for people to concentrate much more on individualistic ambitions and regard childbearing as less of a normal duty than was the case in the past, then that's much more difficult for governments to address. If there's a real shift in attitudes and values, as some have suggested, that's a real worry, but we know a great deal, not a great deal about that at the moment. Demographers are scratching their heads in puzzlement as to why things should have changed so fast.
I think that's absolutely key. Cultural changes in how we view living our lives and the importance of having children. I think that has changed so much because, yes, cost of living, yes, housing, but we know people on the lower end of the economic scale often have more children than middle class and prosperous people. So I do think it's more about those cultural factors and changes in mindset, certainly. But, David, we know the British public have never consented to mass immigration. It's something that's just happened, despite what government's been in charge. David, do you think it's fair to say we seem to be told that we need high levels of immigration in order to keep our economy going, in order to account for the low birth rate? In your view, is that correct, or is that just wrong?
Well, it's clear that we need migration, at least in the short run, to fulfill certain things that we don't supply ourselves, particularly things like social care and things like that. It's normal to have migration in a country like ours, both in and out. What is not normal is the extreme level to which it's risen and the way in which government action or inaction has allowed it to happen. The record of the last government is dismal in terms of controlling migration. It was run by economic liberals who felt that the needs of the economy and the demands of employers, particularly the demands of the employers, had to be met. There was no firm view that if migration were kept at a lower level, then employers would be forced to innovate, forced to invest, forced to improve productivity. Instead, if you allow almost unlimited access to labour, the incentives for improving the way you do things in terms of services, in terms of manufacturing and all the rest, is not there. A shortage of labour can be a good thing if it forces employers to innovate and change their old-fashioned ways of doing things. And that has not happened. But there is partly, I think, the result that we have the worst investment in Europe, the lowest productivity in the G7 countries. This will continue if migration is allowed to run at recent levels.
Yes, well, thank you very much indeed. Really great to get your view on all this. David Coleman, you are Emeritus Professor of Demography at the University of Oxford. Thank you very much indeed for your time. It is a conundrum now, isn't it? Because our economy has become so dependent on large-scale immigration that how do you turn the taps off? And, you know, every time the government or the Home Office wants to try and clamp down on immigration, the Treasury goes, then our GDP won't grow. But, I mean, what's the point of having big GDP if, you know, individual quality of life is going down?
And now we have an interesting sort of semi-U-turn from the new government, who campaigned on the promise to introduce 2 new changes to how migration works in this country. One of the biggest changes that they wanted to introduce was that companies that were found to have broken employment law wouldn't be able to employ migrant workers at all. That was expected to come in, and now we learn that reports are it won't be in the King's speech tomorrow. So at the very least, it won't come in for the first year of the Labour government. You've got to ask, what sort of internal discussions have they been having? Because they campaigned on this. Now they're not going to introduce it. Is that the Treasury arguing with the Home Office yet again?
Yes, it's a perplexing one. I mean, how many times has the British public voted in a way for lower immigration? I mean, cast your mind back to David Cameron, all those promises about migration being in the tens of thousands. People have been asking for immigration to be cut, and what happens? It goes up and up and up. But Labour may, as you've pointed out many a time on this programme, that Labour will probably benefit from quite a lot of the changes that the Conservatives brought in not too long ago. Those visas are already being cut quite dramatically. So it will probably look a slightly rosier picture if you're concerned about mass immigration next year. But looking at that population rise, it's absolutely enormous. I mean, how on earth can a country our size handle that if it continues on? 610,000 population in just 1 year increase.
We talk a lot about how lucky Keir Starmer has been with his political opponents, with the Tories infighting, the SNP collapsing, sort of being able to win a massive majority on just 34% of the vote. But one of the other things that he'll be very, very lucky about in political terms is that Robert Jenrick, when he was Immigration Minister, brought in these restrictions on dependents. We've seen the number of visas going to international students absolutely collapse. The annual migration figures, which are due out in a few months' time, will be potentially a third, maybe even half the level that they were last year. Now, that won't be anything to do with what Keir Starmer's done. That's what Robert Jenrick did as Migration Minister. But Starmer will benefit politically.
I mean, I wonder if it's time just for a cap on immigration, but we were talking about this a little bit earlier in the newsroom, and then there'd be endless debates over what the cap should be.
I've seen it likened to what the United States has. They have something called the debt ceiling, and every year they argue about whether or not they raise the debt ceiling or not, otherwise the government shuts down. and it becomes a psychodrama for a month in Congress every single year. I think if we were to have an annual cap on migration debated by MPs, that would be a psychodrama every year.
Absolutely. Well, get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. Why do you think Brits aren't having so many children? And also, what do you think of a cap on immigration? We're going to continue to bring you the latest updates and coverage on those two monumental resignations as well today, Gareth Southgate and, of course, Welsh First Minister Vaughan Gething. After the break, we're going to be speaking to former England manager Sam Allardyce. Stay with us.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Now, the last time we spoke, we always talk about the topic of gender and your transition. So talk to me about now, though. What you have done is you've created a comic book about your life and about your transition to tell us things that perhaps the press and media don't talk about.
Yes, so throughout the years I have always been persuaded to write a book, but I was never ready to disclose so much. And I've been working this beautiful comic book. I brought you a little copy. It's here. You can have a look into it later, where I'm detailing past experiences, growing up in Brazil and then moving to this country, and my struggles, the struggles that I had to go through to become the woman that I'm today. I'm a woman. I'm not a biological woman, but I am a woman. I just cannot have babies because I don't have the female organs, but I'm a woman inside out, therefore I use the female toilet. But what has been going on around, there are a lot of people, they regard themselves as being transgender when they're actually not. They don't have any psychological help, they don't have any medical help. They just wear female clothes and makeup and they call themselves female. And they're the ones using female spaces and take advantage of that. And that is what should stop and be controlled.
But that's the problem, isn't it? So what do you do to stop that? I mean, the suggestion was a third extra space. How would you feel about a third extra space where, you know, this is where if somebody is trans or any of those other things can use rather than using the female toilet?
I don't think that would work, actually, because these people that regard those people that regard themselves as being females in their minds, they still would use the female toilet.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 11 minutes to 1 o'clock, and Gareth Southgate has quit as England manager following defeat in the Euro 2024 final.
Yes, his resignation comes after 8 years in charge of the Three Lions, which saw England reach 2 consecutive Euros finals.
Well, let's get the reaction now of none other than former England manager Sam Allardyce. Sam, we were speaking not so long ago on the prospect of this potentially happening, and now it has your reaction.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I think that I've said before that 8 years is a long time as an England manager. I think there's only Sir Ralph Ramsey and Walter Winterbottom served longer as England manager than Gareth, and he's left with an outstanding success record. I mean, nobody can argue with that, apart from the fact that we didn't quite clinch the ultimate final that we possibly could have done, particularly in the Euros, but came very, very close twice.
And Sam, just explain some of the pressures of this job. I mean, we were saying earlier how everyone has an opinion on every single decision you make, every choice. You're held responsible for how the players perform, just as much as how you as an individual perform as manager. Hugely stressful job. Is 8 years just enough?
Enough. Well, it has been for Gareth, and he's been outstandingly successful. I mean, it's an intrusion as England manager in your entire life. That's what it boils down to. It's an intrusion not only to you, but also all the members of your family. So you've got to be able to, and your family, cope with all that pressure. Because wherever you are, wherever your family might be, it could be popping up in terms of a photograph here or a photograph there, or what's he doing here or what's he doing there. That's outside coming to a tournament and training the international team to try and be successful, whichever tournament you may be entering.
I have to say, I was watching the England game on Sunday with friends, and we're saying sort of whenever the camera cut to Southgate, we were talking about the pressure that this man must be under. A friend of mine said, "Yeah, it's almost as much as the Prime Minister," and I said, "Absolutely not. Far more people are watching him and judging what he does than judge any politician."
Well, there's no doubt about that, I think. But I mean, the beauty of the job is it's the biggest job you could ever wish to get, though. So you've got to have a deep think of whether you would or wouldn't want it. So Gareth jumped up from the 23s after me into that position, and has grown in that position to achieve what is achieved with the team. I mean, credit to the staff and him and the players. I mean, you can only get so far with a group of players that he had. Without that group of players, no manager could get much farther than that, I don't think. So we're only determined on what success we can gain by the quality of player that we have, and we've had some real quality players over the last 8 years.
And Sam, everyone, of course, has an opinion on how Gareth Southgate has performed, but everyone will have an opinion on who comes next, whether it'll be the right person, the wrong person, a suitable person for the job. I mean, who do you think would be good to take the team forward?
Well, I've said before, I mean, you've got to try and pick English if you can. I mean, the English managers is a must for me, but the pool is so small. That is the biggest problem with the Premier League being so dominant, not just across the world. The Premier League is, probably the biggest sporting global brand across the world in football terms. That means the pool of English managers that may be on the short list for England is very, very small indeed. So whether they try and point from within again, because you got to bear in mind Gareth was appointed from within. So whether they look at that situation, and outside of that, there's not a lot of English managers that they could perhaps put on the short list, and that means will they go foreign? And for me, that'd be an absolute disaster. So I hope that's not the case, but we'll have to wait and see.
Well, there we go, an English manager for the England team. Thank you very much indeed, Sam Allardyce. You, of course, a former England manager. Thank you very much.
Goodness me, yeah. I'm in two minds about this idea of an English manager or not, because, of course, I just can't get Sven out of my head.
Don't go anywhere. Shortly, we're going to be hearing from First Minister Vaughan Gething following his shock resignation. Stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Heavy showers will affect northeastern areas through today. There is a rain warning in force, but from the west it will turn much drier through today, and that leads us into a brief hot spell across the southeast to end the week. That's as a ridge of high pressure builds in from the west through the day. Low pressure still affecting eastern areas. That's where we've got the rain warning in force for northeastern areas of England and parts of eastern Scotland as well. We could see some very heavy showers here, but the bulk of the rain and cloud will push away to the North Sea, and behind it will turn much drier and brighter across western areas. Temperatures climbing
towards the high teens, low 20s across some southern areas. So a bit of a warmer day once the sun does come out this afternoon. And that higher pressure is going to continue to dominate as we head into Tuesday evening. So that means it will be a fairly fine end to the day across western areas of Scotland. We've still got this warning across eastern areas, though, so do watch out for those heavy showers. There could be some surface water and localised flooding. Northern Ireland seeing a fairly bright end to the day, still a risk of the odd shower here and there. Also across parts of central areas of England and to the southeast, but across the west, a bright end to the day. And clear skies will become more widespread through this evening, so it's going to be a much clearer and drier night tonight once the last of the rain clears off to the east. So that does mean with clearer skies it will be a fresher night. Last night was quite a mild night, particularly compared to recently. Tonight temperatures will dip down a little lower in rural areas, but I think for many towns and cities will be in the lower teens, so not too bad at all. And with the July sunshine coming up nice and early, it will be a bright start to the day on Wednesday. And Wednesday's looking like a pretty fine day across much of the UK. There'll be a bit more cloud developing into the afternoon, a risk of the odd shower here and there, but most of us are going to stay dry with some warm sunshine, particularly compared to recently. Highs of 24, possibly 25 degrees across the south and into the high teens elsewhere.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign, and thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War. Restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother, and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 16th of July. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Gareth Southgate sensationally quits after 8 years as England manager. 2 Euros finals, the now former manager bowed out, telling fans their support has meant the world to me. I'm an England fan and I always will be. Thank you, England, for everything.
And it's been another shock resignation. Vaughan Gething has quit as Welsh First Minister just 4 months into the job. We'll be hearing from the Welsh First Minister shortly.
And elsewhere, a bandaged Trump defiantly took to the stage last night and announced his vice presidential pick, Senator Vance, who claimed Britain will be an Islamist country under Labour. And as the Republicans confirm their presidential ticket, we ask, how will this all affect the United Kingdom?
And, of course, we want your views and opinions on all the stories we cover. You know the drill by now. gbnews.com/your say.
That is indeed the way to get in touch. But first, your headlines with Sam.
Tom, Emily, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. It's just after 1 o'clock, and the top story this lunchtime. The Prince of Wales has described Gareth Southgate, who's resigned as England manager today, as an all-round class act. After almost 8 years in charge, Southgate says, as a proud Englishman, it's been the honour of my life to play for the nation and to manage the England squad. His announcement comes just days after the team lost the Euros final to Spain. FA Chief Executive Mark Bullingham has praised him for transforming the men's side and delivering unforgettable memories. They say it's hoped the successor will be confirmed as soon as possible. And as we were hearing, in Wales, First Minister Vaughan Gething has announced he is standing down after 4 members of his cabinet quit their post this morning. He's said to be discussing a timetable for his departure, but claims suggestions of any wrongdoing are politically motivated. It comes after he lost a confidence vote in the Senate last month, following a row about a donation to his leadership campaign. Well, in the last few minutes, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has thanked him for his service, while Plaid Cymru is calling for a snap election. The government has launched a major assessment of the UK's future military as the Prime Minister warns the world is, he says, more dangerous and volatile. Sir Keir Starmer's promising to bolster what he's described as Britain's hollowed-out armed forces, though he's not offered a timeline for raising defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. It comes as the new Defence Review Chief, Lord Robertson, says the UK faces an urgent and deadly threat from China, Iran, from Russia and North Korea. The government's promising to deliver its findings in the review by the middle of next year. Defence Secretary John Healey says it will lay the groundwork for Britain's new era in defence.
The world is changing fast. The threats are growing. In those circumstances, it's right we take a look at the threats, the capabilities we need, the state of our armed forces, as well as the money that's available to fund those. And that's the way that we balance, if you like, the requirements for stronger national security with the responsibilities for sound public finances.
Tributes are being paid to Jay Slater following yesterday's discovery in Tenerife of a body there. Lucy Law, who was one of the last people to hear from the teenager, says she's lost for words. She was on holiday with the 19-year-old when he disappeared 4 weeks ago. And in a post on social media earlier, she's described Jay as one of a kind. Matt Smith, a vicar in Jay's hometown, has this message for the family.
Our message would be that the community have always been here for you and supporting you and praying for you, and that's been very evident in the response that they've had. For this family, we're standing beside you as much as you need us to be, and we're here for you.
In the US, Donald Trump has appeared in public for the first time since the assassination attempt on him in Pennsylvania. The former US president was applauded for several minutes at the Republicans' National Convention in Wisconsin.
We are grateful for you to be our nominee for the 47th President of the United States of America.
Wearing a bandage over his right ear after he was shot, Trump waved and raised his fist to supporters at the event and also announced his running mate for the election. J.D. Vance, the man who once compared him to Hitler and called him an idiot, will become vice president if Trump re-enters the White House after the vote in November. Meanwhile, his rival Joe Biden has admitted it was a mistake to tell supporters that it was time to put Trump in the bullseye. He was speaking to Lester Holt on NBC News.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that won't accept the outcome of this election automatically.
Here, the new Labour government says its doors are open to areas of the UK which want to take on more powers from Westminster. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's so-called devolution revolution is promising to transfer more powers out of Whitehall than ever before. She's written to council leaders urging them to partner with the government. Secretary to the Treasury James Murray says the move will benefit the country.
We know that putting those powers in the hands of local leaders is in a really important way of driving that economic growth. And if we can get economic growth up across the country, which is one of our central missions as a government, that's the way to make people better off.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you for another update in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 6 minutes past 1. Now, Vaughan Gething has announced he's stepping down as Welsh First Minister.
Yes, the announcement came after 4 members of his government quit, demanding that he resign.
Well, Mr Gething says he'll now start the process of discussing a timetable for the election of his successor.
Well, former Special Advisor at the Wales office, Lauren McEvert, joins us now. Lauren, getting reaction on this, people don't seem all that surprised.
No, this is a resignation that is not before time. They just about kept a lid on this scandal-ridden First Minister throughout the course of the general election. Wales and Welsh devolution is something where there is enormous apathy in Wales around the Senedd elections, around the activities of the Welsh Government versus the activities of the national government at Westminster. You see that in terms of voter turnout, you see that in terms of actual knowledge about who does what within the country. So Wales had obviously a very good showing from the Labour Party at the general election, in spite of what was going on with the First Minister. Labour can take some credit for having kept a lid on this throughout the general election and having that result come to them as a result. But it is not before time that Vaughan is standing down. There's just too many things that have gone wrong in his leadership, and unfortunately that means he's going to be the shortest ever serving First Minister.
But of course, there have been several short-serving First Ministers in Wales before. I think the first one had to resign after a year or so. Welsh devolution only passed on a 50% turnout with 50% of the vote. It seems like most Welsh people are pretty indifferent towards this institution, and yet the Parliament is doubling in size under the policies of this Welsh Government.
Well, the vote on that hasn't actually passed yet, and what's interesting is if they go to a snap Senedd election, which is it's not without difficulty to achieve that, that'll mean there'll be a pin put in that doubling for another 5-year period, because they won't be able to pass the legislation in advance of that, which would be quite the outcome for Vaughan to have substantially trashed Mark Drakeford's legacy piece of constitutional change from within the Senedd. I think he would be very, very not proud of having had that result come down the line on his watch. But the difficulty that Wales faces is there is not enough knowledge in the general population still, all these years later, about who runs what within Wales. I just spent the last 2 years on the Welsh Government's Constitutional Commission, and one of the things that we polled on, one of the things that we extensively engaged on, was how much everybody knew about who ran Wales. And 25 years down the line, the answer is still too few people know too little about who runs Wales, and the Welsh Government has that working to their advantage because they get to behave like this within government. You know, they get to take enormous political donations from very dubious sources. They get to fire ministers at will, despite the evidence not being there to do so. And they get to hold on to power during a general election and only have four ministers resign in a concerted effort after they've secured a Labour victory at Westminster. So there's a lot that's wrong in the heart of politics in Cardiff Bay, but hopefully Vaughan Gething going will clear some of that up.
I mean, Lauren, just finally, very quickly, has devolution been a success in Wales?
I think a middling success. Look, I am in favour of more decisions being taken at a more local level. It is questionable whether or not having what is essentially a one-party state governing Cardiff Bay for the last 20 years has been a good thing for Welsh political discourse. I think it's questionable whether or not we have the right electoral system in place within the Bay, but I don't think that the proposals on the table for a closed party list system are the answer to any of the problems that exist within Welsh devolution.
Laura McKevitt, former advisor at the Wales office, really appreciate your thoughts on this issue. Really, really fascinating case there. And of course, it seems that every part of the United Kingdom has had a very short-serving leadership very recently. Liz Truss lasted around 50 days, Humza Yousaf around a year, and now Vaughan Gething, 118 days.
Turns out it's quite hard to be a leader, eh? Keir Starmer has issued this statement. He says, I want to thank Vaughan for his service as leader of the Welsh Labour Party as First Minister. He says Vaughan should take enormous pride in being the first black leader of any country in Europe. He says that achievement would have broadened the ambitions and raised the gaze of a generation of young people in Wales and beyond. So beyond his identity, really, there's not much positive that Keir Starmer has said in this statement. Apart from that, he wishes him all the best.
I mean, that's like saying someone should say well done to Liz Truss for being a woman. I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily the most praise that could be heaped on someone.
And that's what Keir Starmer managed to say. Anyway, ahead of the King's speech tomorrow, and with a potential Tory leadership race brewing in the background, we're going to go to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who is with the treasurer of the 1922 committee, Geoffrey Clifton Brown. Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, I should say. Christopher.
Emily, Tom, right. Joining me now is Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, who's the treasurer of the 1922 committee group, and they select or help select or please put the various measures in place to find the new Conservative leader. Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, when are you going to sort it out?
So, Chris, it's delighted to be here. Can I say straight away that under the party's constitution, the 1922 committee controls the parliamentary process, and the board, on behalf of the party members, controls that part of the process. So the 22 will have a process to get it down to 2 people out of however many apply, and we don't know at all how many people will apply. It's then handed over to the party board to organise the process for the members to have a final choice. And I can assure your listeners that the members, under the Constitution, will have the final choice.
So when will the party have a new leader? By what date? By the party conference? By Christmas? Sometime next year?
Well, that's to be decided yet, but I think there is a feeling that we need to do this with some speed, not undue haste, but some speed for a number of reasons. Firstly, we are the official opposition, so we need a leader in Parliament that can start to do Prime Minister's questions and have a permanent team so that at every stage we are challenging this new government. But more importantly than that, I think there needs to be somebody amongst our own members and our own members of Parliament who can actually start to lead us in the direction that he or she wishes to go, leading up, of course, to the next election.
There's talk about an interim leader that allows you more time to find the ultimate leader. Do you want an interim leader? David Davis, Ian Duncan-Smith?
Personally, I think an interim leader would be very messy. Think about it. Whoever it is may not be popular with all of the members of Parliament. They've got to select their own team. They may be there for a month. They may be there for 3 or 4 months. The new permanent leader is eventually elected. They come in. They don't like the original team. It becomes very messy. So I think we will do our level best to avoid an interim leader. And we need to, and one of the other main reasons we need to go on with some speed is that, of course, Rishi has said that he doesn't want to be there too long.
And members will get a say. There was talk from the former chairman of the 1922, Sir Graham Brady, that members are the problem, and let's not give them so much a say in the vote.
That is, in my view, I mean, I like Graham and I respect him hugely, but complete nonsense. If you think about it, I'm about to have a thank you party for everybody who helped me in the election. The number's got up to 70 people. Those 70 people want to have the say in who their next leader's going to be. Multiply that up between 650 constituencies in the country, and it's essential that our membership has a say and that we want to encourage more members so that we become stronger as a party.
So members are going to say, but what stops your lot kicking out an MP, a leader who becomes unpopular? 15% of members can force a leadership vote. That's like 18 Tory MPs, given the current numbers of MPs in Parliament who are Tory.
Well, again, this is something that we will need to discuss in the 1922. 15% has historically been the number, but when we were a much bigger party. I think that we would need to really seriously look at that, because imagine getting a new leader, going through all the process, and then in a few months down the line, a few disaffected people actually want to get rid of him. So I think we need to make that number a realistic number to try and make it a real test if people want to get rid of a leader.
Will we see the first idea of timings before Parliament breaks up for its summer break at the end of this month?
Well, there is a need, as I've said, for a number of reasons, to get on with this process. I think the timing has still got to be discussed by the 22 and the board, but I think it will become very clear by the end of the week what the timing is going to be.
And will MPs say that whoever's elected will be the leader until the next election, or will there be more of this messing about, as we saw with Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss and finally Rishi Sunak?
Well, if colleagues have learned anything from the last election, they know very well, as I found out from the doorstep, numerous people were saying to me, oh, you're a divided party, you're all over the place. If we want to become trusted by the public, our constituents, we need to have a leader, a strong leader, setting a direction for the party, challenging the government in Parliament, and one who is there until the next election. If you recall back to 97, we had at least 3 different leaders before the following election and made 0 progress. So we do need a strong leader, and in my view, somebody who is going to be there until the next election.
Just you and me talking, Jeffrey. Who's it going to be?
I can't possibly tell you that, and I will never publicly declare, because as an officer of the 22, running the process or helping to run the process, I can't possibly declare for anybody.
I knew that, of course, but you're looking at standing for election also in this next Parliament, in the current Parliament?
Absolutely. So I've been considering what I'd like to do in this current Parliament, making a contribution, and I've been Meg Hillier's Deputy Chairman on the Public Accounts Committee, working very closely with her. The Public Accounts Committee is one of the most influential committees in the Parliament. As Deputy, I am now going to run for Chairman, which has to officially be from the opposition party.
And that will allow you to be scrutinising how Labour, the government, spends our tax money.
Exactly. The job of the PAC is to scrutinise every single taxpayer's pound spent properly, and I will be fair but firm, as I was with our last government when I was very critical of 25,000 people being released from hospital into care homes without any testing during the pandemic, and a substantial number of those died. I said in very strong terms that that was wrong, and I will continue to do that as chairman of the PAC.
And just finally, going back to leadership, as a senior shop steward for Tory MPs, can you tell our viewers and listeners that the years of this internal leadership contest, jockeying for position, will be over in this Parliament?
Well, I very much hope that will be the case. As I've just said, it really is important that we have a new leader who provides strong leadership, strong policies, strong discipline in the party to become a united party, so that we can be trusted again and respected by the British electorate come the next general election.
Well, Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, thank you for joining us on GB News. And there you have it, Tom and Emily. We'll be hearing more about the plans to establish a new leader and the timetable for electing that person, probably this week or next week.
Christopher Hope, thank you very much.
Very good indeed. Now we've got some breaking news to bring you. The body found in Tenerife has now been confirmed as Jay Slater. The post-mortem has found that the injuries on Jay Slater's body were compatible with a fall from a cliff.
Yes, indeed. The autopsy's fingerprinting has determined that this body is indeed that of Jay Slater. That's according to a court spokesperson.
OK, well, we're going to cross now to our reporter Sophie Reaper, who is in Jay Slater's hometown. Sophie, the confirmation that the body found in Tenerife is that of Jay Slater.
Well, I think it was the news that we were perhaps all expecting after it broke yesterday, that remains had been found so close to where Jay Slater's last location was known to be. It may have been the news that we were perhaps all expecting, but it's certainly the news that nobody wanted. We're hearing in the last few moments that autopsy fingerprinting has indeed confirmed that those remains found were those of Jay Slater. We also heard in the last hour or so that documents found amongst those those remains also belong to the missing 19-year-old. Tom, you mentioned there as well that the injuries suffered were compatible with a fall from a cliff. We know yesterday, after the civil guards said that the remains were found at the bottom of a steep and inaccessible area, we perhaps thought that that would be the case, that Jay had fallen down some kind of ravine. We've seen pictures over the past few weeks or so since he's been missing of that terrain in the rural de Tenno Park, where police have been carrying out their search. We've seen the steep landscape, we've seen how unforgiving and rocky that it is. So when we heard yesterday steep and inaccessible area, we thought it may well be the case that he had indeed fallen down somewhere, like off a cliff, for example. We obviously heard from the civil guard yesterday that they'd found the lifeless body of a young man in the Mascot area after 29 days of constant search, and that those remains had been found alongside Jay Slater's possessions and his clothing. So here in Oswestwhistle, the mood very much was thinking that likely were the remains of Jay Slater. His family and friends, of course, over in Tenerife. His mother, Debbie, has been there since the day after her son first disappeared. She has been carrying out that search for her son ever since, but we now know, of course, that that body found yesterday was that of the missing 19-year-old from here in Oswestwhistle, Jay Slater.
Sophie, just to repeat there has been autopsy fingerprinting that has enabled this identification. It doesn't bear thinking about, but of course, if it is correct that he had a significant fall 29 days ago in Tenerife, that is quite some time that he will have been exposed to the elements there. But of course, documents found on his body as well belong to Jay Slater. So now that has all been confirmed. But Sophie, you have been in his hometown all day. Already tributes were pouring in.
Yes, absolutely. I think we were here 3.5 weeks ago when there were messages of hope pouring in, written notes inside the church here behind me of hope for Jay to come home, of prayers for him to return to Oswestwhistle. But now we've had that confirmation. We obviously thought that was likely the case. Over the past few hours, we have seen a couple of bunches of flower delays. I wonder if we can perhaps pan onto those flowers now. You can just see them there. One of which with a blue ribbon tied around the stems. That blue ribbon initially was a symbol of hope here in Oswestwhistle. I assume now it will become a symbol of commemoration now that we have had we've had it confirmed to us that the body found yesterday in Tenerife was the one of Jay Slater. Now, of course, I mentioned earlier there would be a service here at the West End Methodist Church in Oswestwhistle this evening, with members of the community gathering together as a sign of strength and a sign of support for Jay's loved ones. That will now, of course, I imagine, become a service of commemoration now that we know for certain that the remains recovered were those of the 19-year-old. I imagine people will be gathering in quite large numbers now that we've had that confirmation to show their respect for the loss of life for that young man who once lived here in this small part of Lancashire.
Hard to imagine sitting here, the ordeal that Jay Slater's family and friends have been through. He was just a young lad who went on his first holiday abroad without his parents, without his family. He disappeared. There was huge amounts of hope that he would be found, that he'd just gone wandering off, that he might be safe. And then the days go on, the days pass, and now to hear this devastating news that this body has now been identified, this will be hugely traumatic for those who loved him and who were close to him.
Absolutely. I think there was always a real sense of concern for Jay once we saw the conditions. We knew that he'd made that phone call to a friend saying that he had no water and that his phone was on 1%, but he was going to attempt that 11-hour walk through that treacherous, the rural de Tenno Park. We've seen, as I say, pictures of that terrain that Jay absolutely would not have been familiar with, that he really would have struggled with. So I think that concern was always there, but there was still hope. The people had gathered here, friends and family had gone out in their numbers to Tenerife to try and do what they could to try and find the 19-year-old. But one can only imagine what this has been like for his close family, for his mum, for his father, for his closest friends. This must have been the most traumatic time. Of course, tomorrow it will be 1 month since he first went missing, and this time must have been incredibly horrendous for them. But now the worst news confirmed to us, fingerprint evidence showing that the remains found, that it was Jay Slater.
And of course, we were hearing yesterday that all indications pointed to the remains that were found being those of Jay Slater. The reports were that it was possible that Jay Slater has had a fall, but now we have the word definitively from that autopsy that death was caused by trauma consistent with a fall in a rocky area. This is consistent, of course, with those suspicions that were being reported just yesterday.
Absolutely, and I think perhaps that initially is going to cause quite a bit of grief for the family, the idea of that fall in the treacherous area. But I think also in time it will bring relief for the family that they at least have confirmation of what has happened to their son, to their friend, to their loved one, Jay Slater. I think it will perhaps in time bring some comfort to at least know where he is and that he isn't missing anymore.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sophie Reaper, GBNews reporter there in Jay Slater's hometown. Thank you very much.
Now, in other news, Donald Trump is back on the campaign trail following an attempt on his life.
Yes, the former US president was seen sporting a bandage on his ear when he was greeted with cheering crowds at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin last night.
Well, it comes as Donald Trump names Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential nominee, who last week, during a conference, described the UK as an Islamist country with nuclear weapons.
Yes, or that it will be one. A former advisor to Trump's transition team, Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes, joins us now. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I imagine the mood in that convention centre was electric.
It was. In fact, it was so exciting. I was on the phone with some people there, and they couldn't hear me, you know, just the noise that was going on and the enthusiasm and everyone that came and spoke. But most of all, they loved the pastor that did the imitation of Trump when before his benediction, and he said, "I will be blessing you. You will be blessed. It will be the greatest bless. It will be the highest bless." And Trump was laughing. So it was good to see that he had a sense of humor about himself.
Now, of course, this pick of J.D. Vance is controversial to some extent. He's very much a young senator. He's only been in the Senate for 1 year. Of course, he was originally a critic of Trump, now very much seen as a MAGA Republican, as someone very, very closely allied to Donald Trump. One of the concerns that has been raised, of course, is that this limits the broadening of the tent. So there was some speculation that Trump might go with someone who is seen as a bit more of an establishment Republican to make sure that he has the broadest possible reach. Instead, he's doubling down on Trumpism.
Well, it's not Trumpism, it's America first. And there would be no way he would have ever picked anyone from the establishment because they are the rhinos, Republicans in name only. And I think we've discussed this before, that there is a uniparty that is going on. So and in fact, what some people say about J.D. Vance is that he has a lot of enemies. And by that, it's actually viewed as a positive thing because it means he's been fighting against those rhinos.
And Dr. Jan, I must ask you what you make of these comments that have resurfaced from last week's National Conservatism Conference. JD Vance saying that when he's thinking about what the first truly Islamist country to get a nuclear weapon might be, he says maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan, and then we finally decided it's actually the UK since Labour took over. What do you think he's getting at there?
Honestly, I have no idea. I mean, you know, I would like to hear it from his mouth, but I have no idea.
It does talk to the fact that this is a guy who does shoot from the hip, who has spoken at many, many conferences. Of course, he's a best-selling author. He's been a television pundit. There's going to be a lot of material that he has said over the years that will be surfacing now.
Well, of course, you're absolutely right about that. You know, one of the things that bothers me in the mindset is how he's being accused of having been a never-Trumper and he became a Trumper. And as you both know, I sit on a task force with the Department of Defense, and I monitor the thinking and whether people are waking up and how the change is going. And I always find it interesting when they come from this all or nothing mindset. You said something bad a long time ago, therefore you will be condemned and you cannot change your mind. Where he has openly talked about the fact that he misjudged Trump and slowly got to know him.
I mean, suggesting that this country...
We need to have the right... Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, suggesting this country could be the first truly Islamist country to get a nuclear weapon... I mean, it's not very diplomatic, is it?
Well, I'm not sure that he was picked to be diplomatic.
Oh, yes.
You know, Trump isn't exactly diplomatic. So if you're going to have that criteria, let's just agree it's not on the list.
I just wish he'd given more context, what exactly he's talking about here. Some people are suggesting that maybe he was talking about Sadiq Khan because Trump's had a fractious relationship with Sadiq Khan, but I don't think it's that. I mean, is he talking... Oh, I don't know. We'd have to ask him. We'll have to get him on.
I promise you that I will do my research and I will send a message to the producer once I understand. I'll call a few people for you.
We'll have to get you back on. Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts. An interesting time in American politics.
A very interesting time. Well, coming up...
Vaughan Gething is speaking now. Let's listen in. We are trying to establish the audio now to the Senedd chamber. Of course, Vaughan Gething resigning now. We are expecting to hear from this any moment. Vaughan Gething has only been in post for just over 118 days as the First Minister of Wales. He's currently standing in the Senedd chamber. Let's listen in.
Underrepresented communities that there is a place for them, for us, is an honour and a privilege that will never diminish. It is what drew me into public service. Before becoming a member of the Senedd, I was a trade union shop steward. I was an employment lawyer for the largest trade union law firm in the country. I fought employment cases for people who had been mistreated at work. I wanted to give power to those without a voice, to help to make our country a better place for all of us. That has always been my motivation. I campaigned to help create the Senedd, clocking up 30 years of work to support Wales's devolution journey. This has been an incredibly difficult time for me and for my family. A growing assertion that some kind of wrongdoing has taken place has been pernicious, politically motivated, and patently untrue. I have worked hard, followed the rules, and done really difficult and demanding jobs for my country. In 11 years as a minister, I have never, ever made a decision for personal gain. I have never, ever misused or abused my ministerial position. My integrity matters. I have not compromised it. I regret that the burden of proof is no longer an important commodity in the language of our politics. And I do hope for all of our sakes that that can change. I will now discuss with the Welsh executive of my party a timetable for the election of a new leader of Welsh Labour. I will then confirm a timetable to formally stand down as the First Minister of my country. I do, though, want to say thank you to those who have reached out to support me, my team and my family in recent weeks, including today. It really does mean a great deal. To those people in Wales who look like me, many of whom I know feel personally bruised and worried by this moment, I know that our country can be better, must be better. I know that cannot happen without us. There will and there must be in a future a government that looks like the country it serves. A government for all of us to make Wales a better place with and for all of us. Diolch Llywydd, thank you.
Thank you, First Minister, for that statement. The next item is questions.
We just heard from Vaughan Gething, who has resigned as First Minister in Wales. A leaving statement there.
A defiant statement.
A pretty defiant statement.
Saying he did nothing wrong, this was politically motivated, and that he will, or that decency matters for nothing in politics now.
Yes, which is intriguing after 4 ministers of his decided to resign this morning because they wanted him to go. So there you go, Vaughan Gething. I believe we're going to speak to Catherine Forster, our political correspondent, about this in just a moment. But it's very interesting, yes, the sort of I was right, you're all wrong mantra.
And it also feeds into what a terrible set of political circumstances there have been. The Labour Party has done very well in Wales. There are no Conservative seats left in Wales at the general election. And I just wonder, if Rishi Sunak had called the general election for October rather than for July, Vaughan Gething wouldn't have survived all the way through to then. His tenure as Welsh Labour leader and First Minister was probably prolonged by the general election. Had the general election taken place later, Welsh Labour would likely have been rudderless, leaderless, a resigned First Minister. That might have cut through to the electorate, and there might not be 0 Conservative MPs left in Wales.
And now there's calls aplenty for a snap election in Wales following this resignation. We're going to be speaking to our political correspondent as Vaughan Gething steps down with that statement, interesting statement there from the Senedd. Are we going to be speaking to Catherine?
We also heard from Vaughan Gething that he was proud that he was the first person of colour to take that position in Wales. Clearly a very important aspect of his tenure to him, but perhaps it's the only thing he can say. After all, being in office for just 118 days, he hasn't been able to really pass any sort of legislation.
Well, it's the only thing that Sir Keir Starmer had to say, really, about him in his statement on the resignation, that he must be full of enormous pride for being, or he should be full of enormous pride, is what Sir Keir Starmer said, for being the first black European leader. But let's now talk to GBNews political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. You heard that statement. What do you make of it?
Yes, well, it's not even 4 months, is it, since he became First Minister, and it really is quite extraordinary. Now, clearly, he feels that he hasn't done anything wrong, and, you know, that's his opinion. He's very firm in that. But the fact is that there's certainly questions around his judgment, because, you know, he chose to take that £200,000 donation, and that's really where all the problems began. There was a lot of unhappiness from within Welsh Labour, even as he became Welsh First Minister. I was down at the Senedd that day, and although it appeared to be a united front, behind the scenes it really wasn't. And of course the Welsh Conservatives have been particularly keen on talking about this donation and the other problems that have been around him as well, particularly a potential conflict of interest. And then, of course, it all exploded when he sacked this woman, alleging that she had leaked messages. Now, she's firmly denied that she ever did. And now, with the resignation of 4 ministers this morning, it simply meant that he couldn't carry on. But, you know, I was also over in Cardiff just a few weeks ago when he lost the vote of no confidence. And to be honest, although this has all happened sort of quite quickly in the end today, I'm not surprised. I think from the point at which he lost that vote, his days as First Minister were numbered. Now, it came during the general election campaign. It was obviously very difficult for Sir Keir Starmer. I don't think he had much choice. That Vaughan Gething needed to keep in position until after the general election. It was a distraction that they really didn't want. But I think ultimately it's no surprise that this is happening now. So clearly a successor will have to be found. There are some calls for an immediate election. I personally think that that is unlikely because some Welsh Labour would have to vote to collapse the Senedd, which I don't think will happen. But I do suspect ultimately that it might be Jeremy Miles who might take over. And he, of course, was very narrowly pipped at the post in the leadership election just a few months ago.
And that would be a thorn in Keir Starmer's side, because he's seen to be someone who's much more of the left of the Labour Party, whereas Vaughan Gething much more from the sort of faction of the Labour right. But it was interesting listening to his sort of defiant tone there in his resignation statement. There was no contrition to be heard. In fact, he was saying that he had followed the rules at all times, that he had never used ministerial position for personal gain. And indeed, he sounded like a hurt man just then, talking about what a difficult time this had been for him and for his family.
Yes, indeed. And I think a few weeks ago, he was actually in tears in the Senedd. This has obviously been an incredibly difficult few months for him, personally and professionally. Of course, he's just a human, and he has carried this. He's made history being the first black leader of a European nation. That is a big achievement. But yes, really noticeable, the lack of contrition and the lack of apology. He does seem to believe fundamentally still that he hasn't done anything wrong, and some of his supporters think that basically people who've been out to get him have been much harsher on him because he is black than they would otherwise have been. I have to say, I think there are queries around the £200,000 donation, because that was he had nearly 4 times as much to run his leadership campaign as Jeremy Miles did. You know, many people would think that gave him a real advantage, and it was very close. And also, in terms of the members of the Senedd, he was not their chosen one. They would have preferred Jeremy Miles, but he did have the backing of the union, and he was, in theory, going to be the sort of continuity Mark Drakeford person. Of course, it hasn't worked out like that at all. We have had very little calmness and stability, as we did for many years under Mark Drakeford. And also a lot of the policies that Mark Drakeford was trying to bring in have been put on the back burner. The 20 miles an hour for one of them, and there was a lot of outrage and fury when that was being brought in. Also, you know, the Welsh farmers were up in arms. They seem to have softened position on that. There's been lots of policies. Mark Drakeford, not very happy at all about how things have gone since he stood down.
Yes, and Catherine, Keir Starmer has stood by Vaughan Gething pretty much up to this point, putting his support, campaigning with him and the like. He's also released a statement a little earlier saying, again, the line that Vaughan should take enormous pride in being the first black leader of any country in Europe. He doesn't list any other achievements.
No, it's interesting that, isn't it? It's quite a gracious statement by Keir Starmer, and he said, you know, talking about, as you say, being the first black leader of any country in Europe, saying that achievement will have broadened the ambitions and raised the gaze of a generation of young people in Wales and beyond, and I know what a difficult decision this has been for him. Goes on to say, wishes him all the best in his future endeavours. And I think that's it, really. That is the big achievement, because, let's face it, he's not been in office very long. Look at what happened with Humza Yousaf up in Scotland. That was a much, much longer tenure, wasn't it? And I think it's just a reminder, really. We've had so much chaos in Westminster over the last few years, but that chaos is by no means, unfortunately, only the preserve of what goes on down in Westminster. We've seen it in Scotland, we've seen it in Northern Ireland with the astonishing events there, and now we are seeing it in Wales, because at the moment the Welsh government, frankly, seems to be falling apart.
And yet it is strange that race has been brought into this quite so much. When Rishi Sunak has faced questions over his handling of things, over appointments or whatever, he's never said, "Oh, you're just being mean to me because of my race." That seems to be something that Vaughan Gething is edging ever so close to today. I'm slightly surprised to see that sort of language, that sort of he feels like he's under more scrutiny because of his race rather than because he's the First Minister of Wales.
Yes, he does seem to feel that, and you're quite right about Rishi Sunak, of course, and also the cabinet that Rishi Sunak had was, I think, probably our most ethnically diverse that we've ever had. So it is interesting, isn't it? But he does seem to feel it. He is taking it incredibly personally, and I guess that's completely inevitable. But, you know, the questions about the wisdom of that donation, I think, are justified, because this money was taken via a man who had 2 criminal convictions for environmental offences, and then, you know, there was a little bit of money left over, and there was a question over what happened with that. I think the judgment question is a valid one, but yes, certainly people around him think that his colour is a factor, which would be very, very sad if indeed that is the case.
OK, well, thank you very much, Catherine Forster, political correspondent straight from Westminster for us. Now, coming up, we'll keep you updated on all the political shenanigans. What could happen next?
Who's going to resign next?
Who's going to resign next? Southgate, Vaughan Gething, who knows? But in completely different news, Zara McDermott, the Love Island star, has spoken out following allegations regarding her former Strictly Come Dancing partner. We'll have the latest after this short break.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Khloe Kardashian has come under fire after posting a picture of her 6-year-old daughter wearing a full face of makeup.
Yeah, the reality TV star said the youngster was participating in a dance recital and that wasn't an everyday occurrence.
So this morning we're asking, is it ever OK to let children wear makeup?
Well, joining us now is journalist Julie Cook. So, Julie, it's a child wearing full rouge, bright red lipstick, hair tied back, looking very, very stylised, very much, I think, like a young adult. Is this really the sort of thing we should be doing with small children?
Oh, I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, first of all, in Khloe Kardashian's case, it was a dance recital, so it was very much a kind of performance element to it. She said herself in her post, it wasn't something they do every day. She was taking part in a dance activity. So, you know, I think she's vindicated on that front. But I've let my daughter play with makeup since she was 3. When she was 3, she showed a distinct interest in my makeup palettes, going through my stuff. She's 10 now, and while I don't let her wear a full face like a drag queen, I do let her wear, you know, a bit of mascara on a weekend if she wants to. I don't see any harm in it.
Clearly, if you're a child of a Kardashian who's paid millions of dollars to endorse cosmetics, you know, that's part of the fabric of their family. My concern, though, Julie, is putting those pictures on social media where people can see them. We live in an age now where, you know, wrong-uns are scouring the internet all the time.
A lot of girls do enjoy putting makeup on. It's almost like a self-expression thing. It's like painting on a canvas. They're just trying to be a bit artistic. I don't think it's necessarily as sort of sinister as we're making out. And I think as long as you're not posting pictures everywhere or putting them at risk of harm, I don't see any danger.
The People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have said storm. You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Well, 1:50 is the time. Good afternoon, Britain. Now a little bit of, I guess, showbiz news. Zara McDermott. Now, Zara McDermott was made famous by Love Island, but she went on the Strictly Come Dancing. She's become quite the celeb, hasn't she? She's opened up about her treatment on Strictly Come Dancing at the hands of her former partner, Graziano Di Prima, following his exit from the BBC show.
Yes, in a statement on Instagram, the public figure says that she has wrestled with the fear of opening up on social media, but highlighted her respect for the rest of the BBC team.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci. Stephanie, there was some doubt, wasn't there, about what might have happened here because Zara hadn't said anything. Now she has put out this quite long statement for Instagram. What do you make of it all?
Well, Emily and Tom, like Zara had very much been a silent party in all of this. The media's had its say, the newspapers have had its say, the BBC has had its say, Graziano's had his say, but the only person who hadn't spoken about these alleged allegations was Zara McDermott. So, you know, over the past few days, there's been videos that have surfaced, there's been a lot of reports about the physical and verbal abuse that she apparently suffered at the hand of her Strictly Come Dancing partner, Graziano. But this morning she set the record straight on basically what really happened, because there has been a lot of hearsay about whether he was that abusive with her, but now she's confirmed that actually, you know what, there was some form of abuse when she was working with him, which there was some witnesses who have seen it, but also she's given a deeply personal perspective on why she felt she couldn't speak out at the time. You know, in most of these kind of situations, there's always a lot of critics who say, well, why didn't you say something at the time of when it was happening? Why are you talking about it almost 6 months later? But she's now expressed, you know, she felt that there was a fear of victim shaming. She felt like it could affect her career at the BBC. So we now have Zara's side of the story.
Do you feel like this is Zara's side of the story, or is this written perhaps by some public relations guru to sort of paint it all in the best light? Did it sound like her?
I think it does sound like her, Tom, because, she talks about the fear that she had of expressing what she went through. She talks about this day and age where there's cancel culture and a lot of critics will come out, with the whole Strictly drama at the moment. A lot of people, there are critics that are saying, well, you know what, you sign up for the paycheck. Why can't you do the hard work that's involved? And you can feel that pressure where you feel like, actually, I don't want to be that person who's complaining. So, she's had a very good career with
Stephanie,
the BBC.
we're running out of time. Can I just ask you one quick question? Is it true that Graziano has now fled the country to Italy to sort of escape all this?
Well, sources are now saying, Emily, he knows his career's dead in the UK, so the only way for him to go is go back home to Italy, and which is the same kind of route I hear Giovanni's also going through as well.
Right, well, there you go.
Well, Stephanie Tetchy, thank you so much for talking us through that big story there in the world of pop culture.
Yes, I mean, also questions for the BBC. Did they handle it in the correct way? Will we hear more about these allegations? Just how bad was this alleged physical and verbal abuse?
Well, much more to come in the next hour here on GB News. We'll be joined shortly by a former England footballer getting his reaction to Gareth Southgate stepping down. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Heavy showers will affect northeastern areas through today. There is a rain warning in force, but from the west it will turn much drier through today, and that leads us into a brief hot spell across the southeast to end the week. That's as a ridge of high pressure builds in from the west through the day. Low pressure still affecting eastern areas. That's where we've got the rain warning in force for northeastern areas of England and parts of eastern Scotland as well. We could see some very heavy showers here, but the bulk of the rain and cloud will push away to the North Sea, and behind it will turn much drier and brighter across western areas. Temperatures climbing towards the high teens, low 20s across some southern areas. So a bit of a warmer day once the sun does come out this afternoon. And that higher pressure is going to continue to dominate as we head into Tuesday evening. So that means it will be a fairly fine end to the day across western areas of Scotland. We've still got this warning across eastern areas though, so do watch out for those heavy showers. There could be some surface water and localised flooding. Northern Ireland seeing a fairly bright end to the day, still a risk of the odd shower here and there. Also across parts of central areas of England and to the southeast, but across the west, a bright end to the day. And clear skies will become more widespread through this evening, so it's going to be a much clearer and drier night tonight once the last of the rain clears off to the east. So that does mean with clearer skies it will be a fresher night. Last night was quite a mild night, particularly compared to recently. Tonight temperatures will dip down a little lower in rural areas, but I think for many towns and cities will be in the lower teens, so not too bad at all. And with the July sunshine coming up nice and early, it will be a bright start to the day on Wednesday. And Wednesday's looking like a pretty fine day across much of the UK. There'll be a bit more cloud developing into the afternoon. A risk of the odd shower here and there, but most of us are going to stay dry with some warm sunshine, particularly compared to recently. Highs of 24, possibly 25 degrees across the south and into the high teens elsewhere.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Go and get another glass of that bubbly, you've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 16th of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
The body found in Tenerife has been confirmed as that of British teenager Jay Slater. The autopsy found that Jay Slater's injuries were compatible with a fall from a cliff. We'll bring you the very latest with our reporter in Jay Slater's hometown.
I have never abused my ministerial position. Those are the words of Welsh First Minister Vaughan Gething as he announced his shock resignation just 4 months into the job.
And after 8 years as England manager, 2 Euros finals, the now former manager bowed out, Gareth Southgate that is, telling fans their support has meant the world to me. I'm an England fan and I always will be. Thank you, England, for everything. It's been a busy day for resignations, not just Vaughan Gething in Wales, Gareth Southgate in England. Well, to meet the set, we're going to have a Northern Irish and a Scottish resignation as well, and then we'll have all 4 corners of the United Kingdom.
Yes, please do get in touch if you are living in Wales or you're from Wales, and whether... We were talking a little bit earlier about how there's a bit of disinterest, actually, in what's going on in the Welsh Assembly. Is that true when it comes to what you think in your family? Because, yes, the turnout for some of these elections is quite low. How important is it to you, this Vaughan Gething, this resignation?
It's interesting. The state of the SNP in Scotland is well publicised and was likely a big contributing factor for the massive fall in seats, going down to just 9 seats in Scotland from near 50. I mean, that was an incredible collapse in the SNP. However, there has been similar consternation in Welsh Labour, but do people really know about it? Do people? How many people could name the First Minister of Wales? When Scottish devolution was passed by referendum, it was passed by big majorities and big turnouts. When Welsh devolution was passed, only half of the electorate turned out to vote, and only half of them voted for it.
But they've had some bold leaders in Scotland, haven't they? I mean, Nicola Sturgeon. Everyone had heard of Nicola Sturgeon. She made herself heard, that's for sure.
And Alex Salmond.
And Alex Salmond. These are big personalities. Has Wales just not got there yet?
Well,
or not a strong enough message?
Mark Drakeford was, of course, a titan of politics. I'm not actually quite sure he was that big of a personality, but he seemed like a nice enough bloke. Interesting.
Not when it was during the pandemic.
Well, Vaughan Gething was the health minister during the pandemic, who was behind a lot of these decisions, but now he's out as well.
It all makes sense. Anyway, post your comments visiting gbnews.com/your say. Please do. We'll read some out in a little bit, but it's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 4 minutes past 2, and the top story today, as we've been hearing, it's been confirmed that a body in Tenerife is that of missing British teenager Jay Slater. The 19-year-old from Lancashire disappeared on the island a month ago after attending the NRG Music Festival there. A Spanish court says he was identified by his fingerprints during a post-mortem, and the injuries to his body are, they say, consistent with a fall causing his death. And posting on social media earlier, his friend Lucy Law, who was one of the last people to hear from the teen, says she's lost for words. Reverend Matt Smith, a vicar in Jay's hometown, had this message for his family.
Our message would be that the community have always been here for you and supporting you and praying for you, and that's been very evident in the response that they've had. For this family, we're standing beside you as much as you need us to be. We're here for you.
Vaughan Gething's told the Welsh Parliament that serving as First Minister has been the honour of his life, as he announced today he's stepping down. Earlier, 4 members of his cabinet quit, saying they didn't think he could deliver a stable government. He's been under increasing pressure in recent months since losing a confidence vote last month over concerns about the donation to his leadership campaign. But he insists he's done nothing wrong.
I have worked hard, followed the rules, and done really difficult and demanding jobs for my country. In 11 years as a minister, I have never, ever made a decision for personal gain. I have never, ever misused or abused my ministerial position. My integrity matters. I have not compromised it.
The Prince of Wales has described Gareth Southgate, who's resigned as England manager today, as an all-round class act. The announcement comes just days after the team lost the Euros final to Spain. FA Chief Executive Mark Bullingham has praised Southgate for transforming the men's side and delivering what he's called unforgettable memories. Well, Southgate took over from Sam Allardyce in 2016. His predecessor says he's done everything he could in the job except win a trophy.
I'm not surprised. I think that I've said before that 8 years is a long time as an England manager. I think there's only Sir Ralph Ramsey and Walter Winterbottom served longer as England manager than Gareth, and he's left with an outstanding success record. I mean, nobody can argue with that, apart from the fact that we didn't quite clinch the ultimate final that we possibly could have done, particularly in the Euros, but came very, very close twice.
The government has launched a major assessment of the UK's future military as the Prime Minister warns the world is, he says, more dangerous and more volatile. Sir Keir Starmer's promising to bolster what he's describing as Britain's hollowed-out armed forces, but he's not offered a timeline for raising defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. It comes as the new Defence Review Chief, Lord Robertson, says the UK faces an urgent and deadly threat from China, Iran, from Russia and from North Korea. The government's promising to deliver its findings by the middle of next year. Defence Secretary John Healey says it will lay the groundwork for Britain's new era in defence.
The world is changing fast. The threats are growing. In those circumstances, it's right we take a look at the threats, the capabilities we need, the state of our armed forces, as well as the money that's available to fund those. And that's the way that we balance, if you like, the requirements for stronger national security with the responsibilities for sound public finances.
And in the US, Donald Trump has appeared in his first public appearance since the assassination attempt on him in Pennsylvania at the weekend. The former US president was applauded for several minutes at the Republicans' National Convention in Wisconsin.
We are grateful for you to be our nominee for the 47th President of the United States of America.
Donald Trump has appeared in public for the first time, as I just mentioned there, that you heard, as many round of applause were made for him. He was wearing a bandage over his right ear, with Trump waving and raising his fist to supporters at the event. He also announced his running mate for the election. J.D. Vance, the man who once compared him to Hitler, will become vice president if he re-enters the White House after the vote in November. And meanwhile, his rival Joe Biden has admitted it was a mistake to tell supporters that it was time to put Trump in the bullseye. He was speaking to Lester Holt on NBC News.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that won't accept the outcome of this election automatically.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Plenty more still to come with Tom and Emily throughout the next hour. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2. Now, some breaking news. Debbie Duncan, the mother of Jay Slater, says that the confirmation of her son's death in Tenerife is the worst news and that her heart is broken.
Yes, this follows findings from the British teenager's post-mortem in Tenerife, confirming that injuries on Jay Slater's body were compatible with a fall from a cliff.
Well, let's cross now to our reporter, Sophie Reaper, who is in Jay Slater's hometown. Sophie, some tragic words from Jay Slater's mother.
Absolutely. I think the news that no one wanted, even if we did perhaps suspect that it was inevitable that we would get that eventually. She, of course, describing herself as heartbroken, she said, "I just can't believe this could happen to my beautiful boy. Our hearts are broken." That's in the past few minutes. We've also heard today, of course, from one of Jay's friends, Lucy Law. She was the last person to hear from Jay, as far as we know. She took to Instagram this morning to say, "Honestly lost for words, always the happiest and most smiley person in the room. You was one of a kind, Jay, and you'll be missed more than you know. I'm sure you'll have your dancing shoes polished and ready, waiting for us all. We all love you, buddy. Fly high." Incredibly moving words there from Jay's loved ones, from his mother and from one of his best friends. Incredibly heartbreaking news for them to have to come to terms with. I think when he first went missing 4 weeks ago, there was that sense of hope here in Oswestwhistle and also for the search parties over in Tenerife. Here, there was a vigil held 3.5 weeks ago where members of the community gathered. They wrote messages, heartfelt messages of hope for Jay's homecoming. For example, some saying, "Sending my love and prayers, Jay, wishing all my heart on your safe return." Another, "Oswestwhistle is with you. We have hope. Can't wait for you to come home, Jay, so that we can see you smile and watch you dance. We're praying for you." So those messages of hope, that sentiment of hope, they were there. This entire place is covered with blue ribbons, the symbol of hope. And it's not just this church, the entirety of Oswestwhistle, you can see those blue ribbons. This was a community united in that hope for Jay's safe return. But yesterday, of course, we did receive the news that remains had been found close to where Jay's last location was known to be, and that they had been found alongside Jay's possessions and some of his clothing. So I think we all perhaps suspected that might be the case. Then in the last hour or so, we heard from a court in Tenerife that autopsy fingerprinting had indeed confirmed that the remains found yesterday were in fact those of missing 19-year-old Jay Slater. We also heard in fact that documents found on the body belonged to him as well. So really the writing was on the wall. We suspected that this would be the case. You mentioned as well, Emily, of course, that the injuries that he had, we heard from that court spokesperson, that they were compatible with a fall from a cliff. So incredibly heartbreaking news, but not entirely unexpected, I'm afraid. And that is reflected here in Oswestwhistle. This evening, there will be a service held here at the Methodist Church. It was going to be a symbol of support and strength, but I think now it will become more of a commemoration as people come here to express their grief at the loss of a 19-year-old boy.
We hope the family and friends can take some comfort from that. Thank you very much indeed, Sophie Reaper, our reporter there in Jay Slater's hometown.
Now, in other news, Gareth Southgate has quit as England manager following that defeat in the Euro 2024 final on Sunday.
Yes, his resignation comes after 8 years in charge of the Three Lions, which saw England reach 2 consecutive Euros finals.
Well, let's get the reaction now of former England footballer Trevor Stephen. Because, Trevor, I suppose people will look back on Gareth Southgate's career as England manager and define it as all these attempts that got so very close and yet so far.
Yeah, you can look at these finals lost, the semi-finals lost, but I think you need to take a bigger, broader look at the 8 years that he's spent with at the head of the English football team. He's done an absolutely marvellous job in looking at the culture and the environment of how an England team was looked upon. From the media in particular and from fans, and internally, he changed the landscape for the young England footballers, and particularly those under 16s, under 17s, under 18s, etc., etc. And all of that, all the growth in those teams and squads and academies were very much under Gareth Southgate's umbrella. Of course, he goes on then to take the full team, went in as an interim manager, and then holds down the position for 8 years. And I don't think any of us saw that coming. He has lifted the bar really, really high. Unfortunately, that bar that he set, he just hasn't been able to also clear that as far as getting victories in the most important games. But his legacy for me is really set in stone. He has changed the face of how the English team, the England team, is looked upon by the general public and the media. So I think overall it's been a fantastic effort on his part, and he should be very, very proud of what he's done. Perhaps didn't have that absolute technical expertise, let's say, at the cutting edge, to take England to the victories, because we certainly had the squad, and we certainly had the players. We even had the players who were not even in the squad who would have performed extremely well given the opportunity to. But yeah, I just don't think he had the know-how at the end of the day, and we stumbled again just when we looked like we could be doing something absolutely memorable.
And as someone who's played in the England football team yourself, just how important is it to have the right manager leading the team?
Yeah, I played under Sir Bobby Robson. He gave me my first cap way back in 1985, and then I played under Graham Taylor as well into around the 92 period. I played with Bobby when the media was very, very different. We were very vulnerable as players because there was nothing between us and the reporters. No barriers whatsoever. I mean, they would be in the hotel with us. They'd be at the dinner tables with us, and so there was no separation. And the weight of the shirt has been talked about a lot. It was extremely heavy in those days. Obviously, a thrill to play for your country, but the expectancy and the delivery, and the '66 World Cup is still looming now. It was looming very much in the early '80s and mid '80s. So it is important about getting the mood right. It's about what does an England manager do? He's got to get the mood right, the spirit right. You can't really you're not really coaching these players at that level because they've already done that at their club level and get coached by some fantastic people, some of the greatest coaches in the world. So it's about getting your right, set up your formation and having those players comfortable within it. Now, we just didn't manage to get that under Gareth. It wasn't just once, it was several times. And he's also criticised for potentially not making the substitutions when he might have done in games. And I think we were all jumping up and down at times as to he was a bit too loyal to some players, I feel, and perhaps not the right formation for the players that we had. And possibly, again, as I said, not the substitutions at the right time. But overall, he can be so proud of what he's done. And again, it's not easy to front up for the FA because the demands on you are exceptional. He gets one line wrong and you'll never hear the end of it. And I think he's always been pleasant, honest, authentic, and someone who's a true England fan at heart as well.
Well, 2 Euros finals consecutively. No one can take that away from him. But Trevor, Stephen, really appreciate your expertise and your thoughts on this breaking news. Former England footballer Trevor Stephen there.
Yes, coming up, we're going to be speaking to Dougie Beattie, our Northern Ireland reporter. Things have been kicking off a bit over illegal immigration, and we'll be revealing why the head of the government's Strategic Defence Review says we must modernise British armed forces to face enemy countries.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It was also announced that the Prince of Wales is set to star in a new 2-part documentary on ITV covering his mission to try and eradicate homelessness.
Well, let's talk about this and much, much more with Angela Levin, royal biographer, who joins us in the studio. I'm glad to hear that this documentary's been made, Angela, because I worried that he made this big announcement about homelessness, and I thought, goodness me, here is somebody who could maybe do something about this. And then it's all seemed to have gone quiet.
He's been very busy with it, actually. He's gone all over the country to see different areas and how they have been, and to try and change people's attitude to homelessness, that they're people who need help and want to get back into a normal life, and he's there to do it. I mean, we mustn't forget that in, I think it was 2009, he slept out in the street to see for himself what it was like, and he also helped people who are selling the magazine.
Big Issue, no?
Yes, the Big Issue. And he's worked all day long with the same man twice now. So I think he was actually just covering the basic about what it was like for him and how he can now help other people. He and Catherine are putting £3 million straight away into that, and it's going to
Where
be...
does that money come from?
Their own foundation, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not taking it from our tax or anybody else's, you know. And there will be a lot more. And he's been getting the money to do this. And I think it's he wants to do this so badly because of his mother. You know, she took them to see people who were homeless.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 21 minutes past 2. Now, the Irish Taoiseach has condemned violent scenes outside of an asylum centre in Dublin on Monday, calling them reprehensible.
Yes, 15 people have been charged with public order offences after the anti-immigration protest led to clashes with the police.
Well, our very own reporter Dougie Beattie is in Dublin for us. And Dougie, what went on last night?
Well, first of all, welcome to the Malahide Road on Coolock, just out, it's in the north of Dublin. This was traditionally a very industrial area, and behind me is the old paint factory that they are now trying to place up to 1,500 young men into, asylum seekers, and the locals here don't want it. I'll just bring Sandra in with me here now. Sandra, you're just looking at me. Don't worry about the camera. Tell us, what exactly went on here last night?
Well, it was just, we've been protesting here for the last 115 days. They moved in there about 3:30 in the early hours of Monday morning, and the police came in and told the lads, a couple of lads that were staying here, they had 30 seconds to clear out and do whatever they had to do, and they just ransacked the place. So we just all came down, we all protested here for the duration of the day, and before we knew it, we had all the police here, we had the whatever they are, the ERU, the armed forces and everything. It just got crazy. They ended up then, they basically blocked us all in. They took over the whole road, they stopped all the traffic. They created havoc here, the police themselves.
Well, I mean, what do you want as a local? I mean, you're bound to be well, we know what you're protesting about, but why are you so against it?
We're so against it because we're in an area where it's an underprivileged area. We've got These are the only amenities we have over here for the whole of Coolock, Darndale, Belcamp, Donaghmede. It's a poor area. You know, this is the only amenities they have. They want to put 1,000, 1,500 unvetted males into it. So there's nothing here for the likes of all these men. You know, it's just ridiculous. Like, you know what I mean? Our government are not listening to us. You know, the guards are not listening to us. And I fear for my children, my grandchildren, growing up around unvetted men that are coming in, economic migrants coming into the country. Nobody knows anything about them. You know, we're not told anything about them, and I don't know, it's not safe to have them here, and, you know, grown men in an area where there's all small children growing up, nothing around here for them. There's no jobs in this area for half the people in the area. So why do you want to put them in this area for around here for all small children? It doesn't make sense.
Well, there you have it, Tom. I mean, this is hardly your normal rioter, and this is exactly the type of people that pepper spray were put upon last night by the Irish Police Service, trying to push these immigrants into these centres, and quite clearly nobody is communicating with the locals that live in these areas. And we've seen this a couple of months ago in Wicklow, which was a very, very well-off area of Dublin, and now we're seeing it again in the north of Dublin. The north of Dublin has took the majority of these immigrants, and people here, you've heard it yourself, just want people to talk to them, to consult with them and know what is possible in this area around doctors, surgeries, schools, everything else. The infrastructure isn't here for them, and these people are worried.
Dougie Beattie, thank you so much for bringing us that extraordinary story there just north of Dublin. My goodness me, this migrant crisis affecting all parts of Europe.
Absolutely. Quite shocking scenes, actually, the last couple of days from that area. People really are not happy with the number of migrants coming to that area. But we're going to change story because Britain's armed forces must be modernised to face down what's been called a deadly quartet of enemy countries. That's according to the new head of the government's Strategic Defence Review.
Yes, Lord Robertson made the comments as the Prime Minister launched that Strategic Defence Review, which he promised will tackle international threats head-on.
Yes, well, we're joined now in the studio by GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White, who can tell us more. Mark, please do tell us more.
Yes, well, the Labour government believe that Lord Robertson is very well placed to lead this review. Of course, he was a former Secretary-General of NATO. Before that, he was a Defence Secretary in Tony Blair's government. And it is his job, as a matter of urgency, we say urgency, it's still going to be early next year before we get any kind of conclusion to this defence review. But he will look at the threats that are facing the UK, and he mentioned this deadly quartet. So what he is saying is that you have got North Korea, Iran and China now actively cooperating with Russia, helping to equip Russia for its war that it's waging in Ukraine. And that is a threat out there that needs to be addressed, needs to be factored into what the UK government does about its own defence and the way forward.
And yet, Mark, as you say, this is a review that will stretch into next year, this is being criticised by some people as a delaying tactic. The Labour Party not committing to spending more on our armed forces or giving any sort of time frame about when extra spending will come until after this review. We heard from the Shadow Veterans Minister, Andrew Bowie, earlier on the channel, who said that this is Labour simply kicking the can down the road. That's the criticism.
Well, there's no doubt they've been quite opaque about the decision when it will come regarding a date of when they intend to achieve 2.5% of GDP for our defence spending. I mean, currently, the UK is the 6th largest defence spender out of countries around the world. In NATO, it's the 2nd biggest defence spender. In Europe, effectively the biggest defence spender, aside from Russia, of course. So, you know, it does put a lot of money into defence, £55 billion a year that's going into defence. And we have had a procurement process in UK defence that has been woeful over recent years, with huge projects like the Ajax armoured fighting vehicle programme, 14 years late, with not a single vehicle really in service at the moment out of the almost 600 fighting vehicles that had been planned, and indeed further delays to that because of the communications fit to these vehicles that will also need to be upgraded as well. So that programme is, I think, a really potent example of where procurement has been going wrong over the years. It's taking far too long to come up with a concept, then to design it, to build it, and all along, of course, you've got civil servants and service chiefs who then decide to sort of ask for a bit, you know, because of the long lead time in getting these pieces of equipment onto the front line. They're asking for changes. Oh, there's this latest development. Can we have that added to this particular piece of equipment? That just adds to the delay.
Presumably these types of strategic reviews go out of date very quickly. How important are they as an exercise? I mean, presumably they consult lots of different experts on different regions, different threats, different conflicts, etc., etc. How useful are they when it comes down to actually making decisions like procurement?
You know, I think that is a really, really pertinent point. The reviews themselves, we've had them. The last reviews were talking about the threat from Islamist extremism. That's not the threat we're looking at now. We've seen governments reasserting themselves now in terms of the threat they pose to the UK. We will, without doubt, get a lot of emphasis from this defence review on new technologies, advancing technologies like drones and the like. Now, that, of course, is for the bean counters, something that's very attractive because it's much cheaper to produce a few thousand drones than to churn out aircraft and ships and the like. But Ukraine has shown you that as well as modern technology like cheap drones, they still need manpower. They still need tanks and artillery for the kind of attritional warfare that's playing out in the battlefields of Ukraine.
Really, really interesting times, developing warfare, but perhaps not in predictable directions. Mark White, thank you so much for bringing us the very latest on this strategic review.
Yes, it'll be very interesting to find out how long this review takes and whether it is an exercise in kicking the can down the road. Anyway, coming up, as Donald Trump picks a controversial vice presidential nominee, we'll be bringing you the latest from Milwaukee with a man who was actually at that big conference last night. That's after your headlines with Sam Francis.
2:32, I'm Sam Francis in the GB newsroom, and the top story this hour. Jay Slater's mother says the confirmation of her son's death in Tenerife is the worst news she could have received. In a statement, Debbie Duncan said she can't believe what's happened to her beautiful boy, adding, "Our hearts are broken." The 19-year-old from Lancashire disappeared on the island a month ago after attending the NRG Music Festival. A Spanish court says he was identified by his fingerprints during a post-mortem and that the injuries to his body are consistent, they say, with a fall causing his death. Vaughan Gething's told the Welsh Parliament that serving as First Minister has been the honour of his life, as he announced he's stepping down. Earlier, 4 members of his cabinet quit, saying they didn't think he could deliver a stable government. He's been under increasing pressure since losing a confidence vote last month over concerns about a donation to his leadership campaign, though he insists he's done nothing wrong. The Prince of Wales has described Gareth Southgate, who resigned as England manager today, as an all-round class act. The announcement comes just days after the team lost the Euros final to Spain. FA Chief Executive Mark Bullingham's praised him for transforming the men's side and delivering unforgettable memories. And the government has launched a major assessment of the UK's future military, with the Prime Minister warning the world is more dangerous and volatile. Sir Keir Starmer's promising to bolster what he's described as Britain's hollowed-out armed forces, but he's not offered a timeline for raising defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. It comes as the new Defence Review Chief, Lord Robertson, says the UK faces the threat of a deadly quartet from China, from Iran, Russia and North Korea. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sam Francis. Another update at 3 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Heavy showers will affect northeastern areas through today. There is a rain warning in force, but from the west it will turn much drier through today, and that leads us into a brief hot spell across the southeast to end the week. That's as a ridge of high pressure builds in from the west through the day. Low pressure still affecting eastern areas. That's where we've got the rain warning in force for northeastern areas of England and parts of eastern Scotland as well. We could see some very heavy showers here, but the bulk of the rain and cloud will push away to the North Sea, and behind it will turn much drier and brighter across western areas. Temperatures climbing towards the high teens, low 20s across some southern areas. So a bit of a warmer day once the sun does come out this afternoon. And that higher pressure is going to continue to dominate as we head into Tuesday evening. So that means it will be a fairly fine end to the day across western areas of Scotland. We've still got this warning across eastern areas though, so do watch out for those heavy showers. There could be some surface water and localised flooding. Northern Ireland seeing a fairly bright end to the day, still a risk of the odd shower here and there. Also across parts of central areas of England and into the southeast, but across the west, a bright end to the day. And clear skies will become more widespread through this evening, so it's going to be a much clearer and drier night tonight once the last of the rain clears off to the east. So that does mean with clearer skies it will be a fresher night. Last night was quite a mild night, particularly compared to recently. Tonight temperatures will dip down a little lower in rural areas, but I think for many towns and cities will be in the lower teens, so not too bad at all. And with the July sunshine coming up nice and early, it will be a bright start to the day on Wednesday. And Wednesday's looking like a pretty fine day across much of the UK. There'll be a bit more cloud developing into the afternoon, a risk of the odd shower here and there, but most of us are going to stay dry with some warm sunshine, particularly compared to recently. Highs of 24, possibly 25 degrees across the south and into the high teens elsewhere.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Scarborough, North Yorkshire. The Roundhill Road's currently closed between the A64 and Belmont Road. We've seen delays because of a police incident. Abingdon Street in central London. Now, currently that's closed off. It's because the security barriers in place ahead of the state opening of Parliament, so no way through between Great College Street and Parliament Square. Various stretches of the A24 in Surrey are shut. Northbound closed from Holmwood up towards the Deep Dean roundabout in Dorking. Same story between Pixham Lane and Dorking. That shuts up towards the Givens Grove roundabout northbound and Leatherhead. Southbound side of the A24 shut between the Deep Dean roundabout in Dorking, heading down towards Flint Hill for those emergency repairs. And Hartley Road in Cranbrook in Kent closed by Turndon Road and queuing. That's due to a collision there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, 2:37 is the time. Good afternoon, Britain. And it is Martin Daubney up next, and he joins us now. Martin, there's been a spot of good news for you?
Yeah, so Gareth Southgate has quit. Listen, a lot of working class fans thought she never got the job in the first place. He was the safety choice, he was the clipboard choice, the FA safe pair of hands. Did he unite the country over football, or did he divide them over identity politics, taking the knee, rainbow laces, that letter to English fans? Was that help? Was it hindrance? Who's going to replace him? Please, can we leave the politics out of football? Southgate, of course, not the only person to quit today. Vaughan Gething, shorter shelf life than a lettuce. He's gone from the Welsh Senate. And we've got the Museum of Brexit. Here's the flag that I waved when we left the European Union back on that day. The curator of the Museum of Brexit will join me on the show, the fantastically named Lee Rotherham. Find me a bigger Brexit name than that. He'll be on the show. Plus, of course, all the latest from Dublin, those astonishing protests where the Garda were spraying pepper spray into the face of working class protesters. I'll speak to one, a 78-year-old who was attacked by the police simply for standing up to an asylum seeker plans in his community. That's all coming up 3 till 6.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary what's happening over there. We just touched in with Doogie Beattie. But Martin, what's wrong with rainbow laces?
Well, I think we need to make a choice, don't we? Football should be about taking sides about the teams on the pitch. Making us take sides about identity politics is one of the curses of the modern game, especially when they turn a blind eye to human rights abuses in places like Qatar. They only get on their high horses when it suits them. If you're going to do politics, do it consistently. Or how about leave it outside of the ground and let football just be about football? That's what working class fans want from the next England manager. No more PC nonsense.
To be fair, if you're allowed to wear rainbow laces but not wear a poppy, something's gone wrong. Martin Daubney, thank you very much. Looking forward to it. 3 o'clock. We'll see you there.
It is the hypocrisy, isn't it? You know. Anyway, that's Martin's show. Good stuff. What's coming up?
Well, Donald Trump has bounced back on the campaign trail after Saturday night's assassination attempt. The bandaged former US president was greeted with cheering crowds at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee last night.
Yes, this comes as Donald Trump has picked Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential nominee, who last week during a conference described the UK as an Islamist country with nuclear weapons.
Controversial. Well, let's cross live to The Spectator's political correspondent James Heal, who is in Milwaukee, is at that conference all week. And James, what was the reaction last night to Trump appearing bandaged?
It was absolutely electric. I mean, Donald Trump was always going to get rapturous reception here, but after the events of Saturday, it was like the return of a conquering hero. When he went in, a place just erupted. No one could kind of look away from him. He just sat there as like a Roman emperor, all these tributes being bestowed upon him, the absolute king of the convention. And I think that, you know, yesterday the big story was about J.D. Vance being selected. I was in the hall when that was announced. I was in the hall when Trump came in. There was no comparison in terms of the reaction. This is all Trump, Trump, Trump. And it's very much is his party now, and his pick has proved that as well.
But it's an important choice for Donald Trump nonetheless. Is it a good one?
I think it's a shrewd choice for a couple of reasons. He's obviously going after the crucial Midwestern battleground states. J.D. Vance is obviously a senator from Ohio who won that seat against the odds in 2022. So I think that there's that. He's also a veteran. He's a younger candidate as well. He's just 39, an age which makes me feel inadequate. So I think that he's someone who, you know, is going to obviously be a clear contrast with Trump, who's in his 70s, you know, Biden in his 80s. So he's someone who is someone respected on the right of the party. And I think perhaps that shows very much how Trump's standing in the party has shifted. 8 years ago, he went for a conventional conservative establishment choice in Mike Pence, very much a safe pair of hands, whereas this time he's gone for someone in his own populist MAGA mould. And I think that that's why he's got a good reaction at the convention from talking to delegates so far.
It really is a choice in his own image. There's been some concern that that limits the breadth of the tent of the Republican vote. Also, Ohio still voted for Trump last time round when he lost. There's some speculation Trump should have gone for someone from a state that he didn't manage to win last time. One slightly curious thing I've noticed is that J.D. Vance slightly underperformed on the Ohio ticket compared to other Republicans in Ohio last time round. Do you think that will matter, that this will be seen as a sort of a slight drag on the ticket, perhaps?
I don't think that's really what they're sort of talking about right now. I think that, Vance is someone who is going to be someone who enthuses the base, gets a lot of the kind of right-wing support, also a Catholic. I think he'd be the only second vice president who's a Catholic if he was chosen. So I think that right now it's just dominated completely by Trump, and Trump wants someone, as you say, Tom, who's very much in his own mould, and someone who's going to be a pugilist and take the fights to the Democrats. And of course, in the immediate reaction to that assassination attempt on Saturday, Vance was very much straight out the gate and suggesting that Biden's campaign rhetoric was to blame. I think the more interesting thing as well as the personalities, overall this theme, it's very much one of, I think, actually relative moderation. You've actually got a convention where you've got the Teamsters Union speaking, you've got black Congress candidates being lined up to speak. So I think Trump is trying to broaden the base, and actually they're trying to suggest that they're kind of the ones who can bring America together and get the whole country behind their candidate, which isn't always something we've seen with Donald Trump before.
Has this assassination attempt, James, silenced Trump's critics within the Republican camp?
Yeah, I think that this is very much his party now. And I think that the reaction to that is a sort of rally around the flag effect. I mean, I have seen very little in kind of any way of sort of criticism of Trump, at least publicly. I think right now what you're seeing is people just sort of relieved and glad he's there. And I think actually he's kind of reestablished the narrative in all of this. And actually the Democrats and Biden are playing catch up on it. So his reaction to come out there, he's a man who knows the media. When he came out last night, the crowd were chanting, "Fight, fight," which is what Trump said, of course, when the bullet just missed him on Saturday. And so he very much has obviously captured the moment. And I think his standing in the party, frankly, has never been higher.
Goodness me. Well, James Heal, it will be a fascinating convention to come. Trump, of course, speaking on Thursday as this big ceremonial sort of starting gun on the presidential election really gets going. James Heal of The Spectator, really appreciate your time.
And Nigel Farage will be heading out there to see Donald Trump. I'm sure he'll be at that speech if he can. But yes, King Charles and Queen Camilla are on day 2 now of their trip to the Channel Islands. We're going to keep you up to date on all of that with our royal correspondent next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm joined now by Stefan Kyriasis to give us the latest on everything theatre.
So, yeah, we're going in first with Starlight Express, which is back. It's not in the West End. It's out at Wembley at the Troubadour Theatre, which is a big, almost kind of warehouse space, which suits because, as you know, have you seen the show?
Starlight Express was my first ever musical. I must have been about 7 or 8 years old. I only saw it once, but I remember it being magical.
Well, this one, it's 1984 it started, and it's still running in Bochum in Germany in a huge arena. So basically what we've got, they've slightly tweaked it, and there's a little boy or little girl, depending on the cast, going to bed, obsessed with toy trains and dreaming of trains. Everybody is dressed up. To me, it looks like a cross between Tron and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. I don't really think any of them look remotely like a train, but hey, the songs are Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's pop mixed with kind of cod 1950s rock and roll, some power ballads. The lyrics are politely like something out of an old speak and spell machine or something. He's a steam train, they're out of date, he's being bullied by the diesel and the electric, and he falls for this carriage, the first-class carriage, new girl Pearl, and he wants to impress her, so he enters a race, and that's pretty much it. And when the races happen, all these barriers come up around where we're sitting, the lights are flashing, the music's thumping. It's utterly ridiculous, and I felt like a kind of teenager that was huffing sherbet dib-dabs off a giant block of sugar. It's so much fun, and the really crucial thing about it all is that somehow in the middle of all of that, I just felt myself getting into the story. And when Pearl and Rusty have their little duet, I was very moved, and there's this big starlight sequence, which is the inspiration, the magical starlight that he's seeking. It's beautiful.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:47. Now, here's an interesting one. The Labour MP and Republican Clive Lewis has had to take his oath of office as an MP a second time in Parliament. This after saying that his first oath was under protest. Well, let's take a look at that controversial first oath he tried.
I take this oath under protest and in the hope that one day my fellow citizens will democratically decide to live in a republic. Until that time, I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles according to law.
How do you know someone's a Republican, Tom?
Very interesting.
They tell you.
Also, it's normally King Charles, his heirs and successors. He just said King Charles. That might have been part of the problem. It received a huge amount of criticism online and apparently from the parliamentary authorities as well. So today, Clive Lewis, well, he's had to try a second time with slightly less explicit Republican wording. Take a listen to the difference in this clip.
I was elected to Parliament to represent my constituents and our country to the best of my ability to defend democracy and uphold human rights. And one day, I hope all members of Parliament will be entitled to swear an oath of allegiance based on those values. I do solemnly and sincerely and truly declare and affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law.
Did not say under protest and included heirs and successors there.
He's such a bore, isn't he? I mean, I did tweet this. He's like the boy in class that, you know, thinks he's so much more clever and so much more interesting than everyone else. Just has to be different.
Well, clearly, the parliamentary authorities didn't think that it was all that clever because he got the oath wrong. And he couldn't formally sit as an MP unless he actually takes the oath.
What a plank. Anyway, what a great segue. King Charles and Queen Camilla have arrived in Guernsey as part of their two-day trip to the Channel Islands.
Well, this afternoon, the King has given a speech as he attended a special sitting of the States of Deliberation in Guernsey.
The bailiwick has one of the oldest connections to the Crown. It is therefore a great joy to be here among you once more today to celebrate the close and special relationship which connects us.
Well, there you go. We're joined now by GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, tell us what's happening.
Well, as well as sitting, as Tom was just saying during that clip, in an amazing chair, which really is very, very old indeed.
I'll buy you one for your birthday.
The King and Queen have been getting properly out and about. A wonderful moment where a 91-year-old woman decided to grab the King and kiss him because she was so excited to see the monarch. And the King...
protocol.
And it does break protocol, Tom, but she says she's never kissed a king before. She's 91 years old. Why not? And she did. And the King didn't seem to worry too much. The Queen, though, has a bit of an injury. She's hurt her ankle. If you see, we might have a picture. She has a bandage on her ankle. I'm told that she sprained it, had a small sprain yesterday when she was in Jersey, and she's kind of using her umbrella as a bit of a walking stick. But she's keeping calm, carrying on, still carrying out the engagements as perhaps you would expect from Her Majesty the Queen. But these images you're seeing now is at a specific tea party in Guernsey. And the King has met the daughters of the Navy veteran who taught King Charles back in the 1970s to fly a helicopter. So Peter Vogt, who's a Guernseyman, he trained Charles in Somerset in the 1970s. As I said, unfortunately, he died back in February of this year at 85 years old. He was also an usher during King Charles and Diana's wedding back in 1981.
We're looking at the pictures of the daughters now.
And these are the daughters, and they actually have told reporters there in Guernsey, just that the King wrote to them personally following their father's death back in February, saying it was very kind and unexpected, but of course a wonderful moment for them to be invited to this tea party, to meet the King in person. They also alluded to the fact that perhaps it was a posthumous even kind of gift from their father as well. So a really wonderful moment. And later on this afternoon, the King is going to be meeting a Guernsey goat called Tamsin, who has been conditioned, as in shampoo and conditioned, ahead of the event with Head & Shoulders shampoo, a very specific detail. Of course, other brands are available, but I've never heard of a goat being shampooed ahead of a royal arrival before.
Well, I hope the goats behave better than 2 cows did a little bit earlier on this visit.
Yeah, very frisky, weren't they? Not lots of decorum in front of the Queen.
No. Oh, right, OK.
I think one...
I won't go there.
They got very overly excited in the presence of Her Majesty.
Goodness me!
We did have images earlier. We might be able to show you. If not, they're definitely on the GB News website.
Trying to get these up, and I do want to very much warn people to avert their eyes if they're of a fragile disposition.
Yes, but these 7 cows, Jersey heifers, a specific breed, these are actually being gifted to the King and Queen, and they're going to be taken from Jersey, because these are yesterday's pictures, to the Highgrove Estates, the King's Highgrove Estate, to form a bit of a kind of a breeding herd of these particular cows. But as you may see in a moment, 2 of them decided to start the breeding season a little bit early.
Goodness me.
In front of the Queen, who found it all very, very funny indeed.
Well, I think we might...
So here we go. I think this is it.
A fair warning, I think, has been given to everyone, so do avert your eyes if... But I mean,
I might avert my eyes, actually, Tom.
It's all part of the joy of nature, isn't it?
It is.
I'm sure she's seen worse.
But this is part of this is also part of the same engagement where there was a bit of a security scare yesterday, where the King and Queen were hastily rushed into a hotel for shelter in the open air, but it turns out to be a false alarm. A member of the team raised a bit of concern, and they were kind of taken in. Oh, we didn't get that moment.
Well,
it's on our website.
I think we're gonna censor that just for the good of everyone. Cameron, thank you so much for talking us through that visit. An exciting time for the King and the Queen.
Yes, indeed. And that's it from us for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 12. It is, of course, Martin Daubney up next, so stay tuned for that. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Heavy showers will affect northeastern areas through today. There is a rain warning in force, but from the west it will turn much drier through today, and that leads us into a brief hot spell across the southeast to end the week. That's as a ridge of high pressure builds in from the west through the day. Low pressure still affecting eastern areas. That's where we've got the rain warning in force for northeastern areas of England and parts of eastern Scotland as well. We could see some very heavy showers here, but the bulk of the rain and cloud will push away to the North Sea, and behind it will turn much drier and brighter across western areas. Temperatures climbing towards the high teens, low 20s across some southern areas. So a bit of a warmer day once the sun does come out this afternoon. And that higher pressure is going to continue to dominate as we head into Tuesday evening. So that means it will be a fairly fine end to the day across western areas of Scotland. We've still got this warning across eastern areas, though, so do watch out for those heavy showers. There could be some surface water and localised flooding. Northern Ireland seeing a fairly bright end to the day, still a risk of the odd shower here and there. Also across parts of central areas of England and into the southeast, but across the west, a bright end to the day. And clear skies will become more widespread through this evening, so it's going to be a much clearer and drier night tonight once the last of the rain clears off to the east. So that does mean with clearer skies it will be a fresher night. Last night was quite a mild night, particularly compared to recently. Tonight temperatures will dip down a little lower in rural areas, but I think for many towns and cities will be in the lower teens, so not too bad at all. And with the July sunshine coming up nice and early, it will be a bright start to the day on Wednesday. And Wednesday's looking like a pretty fine day across much of the UK. There'll be a bit more cloud developing into the afternoon. A risk of the odd shower here and there, but most of us are going to stay dry with some warm sunshine, particularly compared to recently. Highs of 24, possibly 25 degrees across the south and into the high teens elsewhere.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, it shocks me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and